Actually, as I said that, it looks like we now have everyone with us this evening. Welcome, everyone. This is our first work session of 2021. Thanks for coming out early this evening. And I think there's little reason to have much ado other than to hand this over to Chris. This hour is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Board, for coming here early tonight. I appreciate it. I'm also joined here by Nathan Scalick from JVA. He's the lead project engineer for TIP,
Hi,
and
all.
I guess with that, I'll get started. So first of all, I won't get too deep into the history, but we started this process in August of 2018 is when we first became aware of the project funding. And then it wasn't until September of 2019 that Nederland was actually awarded funds. So we went through a whole year of going through CDOT meetings and so forth to get the project approved by them. And then the following, 9 months or so, we went through CDOT's process, which is very tedious of vetting the project and going through budgeting and the IGA, as you guys are aware, because the BOT's really been part of every step of this process, making sure that we had the right engineers to meet CDOT's criteria. And so it wasn't until about probably April, May of last year when we really got into the OPR. And then through the OPR, I met with various boards, SAB starting in May, ProSab, Planning Commission, the BOT, the DDA, multiple times through that process, and finally got the OPR approved in September of last year. And so went to nearly 10 meetings to participate in Netherlands planning process to get the OPR past the owner's project requirements. Then we got to actually start the meat of the project, the design stage, which what Nathan's most interested in. And so again, we started in the October, November, went to SAB again, ProSab, the DDA, the Planning Commission. Most recently, I went to the BZA. And again, nearly 10 meetings altogether, almost 20 meetings to get to this point tonight to show you where we are and where the project has evolved to. And each part of the process, I get input from various boards, and then I call up Nathan and I say, okay, add this, Nathan, add this little thing here, and we keep tweaking the project and it's evolved to what's in your packet tonight. And it's actually evolved a little bit more than that. So what I'm sharing with you tonight is just ever so slightly different, but nonetheless, as I get more input, particularly from the BZA this last meeting, I make another little change. And so in addition to all that, I've met with business owners, property owners, particularly the property owner for over by Neo's and the bakery, Ned's. I've met with them. I continue to send them information. And then we have a meeting with the actual property owner next week. Kathmandu, Ron Mitchell, of course, has been a part of the project. Mary Ann over there by the realtor's office. I've passed out flyers to all the affected properties that has happened around the project. We also have a page on the town's website that has really like basic information about the project, um, timelines, and the latest concepts. I try to update every couple weeks. I forget the last time. It's probably been a couple weeks since we've updated. Nonetheless, there's a lot of opportunity for people to email me, call me, see the project on its website, and then attend various meetings throughout this process. Let's see. In addition to that, the project aligns with multiple, excuse me, with multiple town planning documents. And I'm not going to go into detail about how it aligns with all of them, although I could. Um, but the DDA master plan, the parks and open space recreation plan, 2017 roads assessment, the comprehensive plan. Um, there's some aspects of the MIP that we're going to follow. And the sustainability scorecard is in the OPR. So it aligns well with a lot of the planning documents over the years for connectivity within the region and um, and just movement of pedestrians around Nederland. So just with all that, I'm just going to get right into the project. So I'm going to share my screen. So hold on a sec. Bear with me. You think after 20 meetings, I'd be really good at this.
Well, I was going to say you actually referred to one of the local businesses as being Neos. So,
Neil, yeah,
you know,
right.
a little
Yeah,
behind schedule.
yeah, yeah, funny. I still call the business connection the post office. And it hasn't been the post office in like 20 years, but I still like call it the post office, and it's a great business. I use it all the time, but stuck in my ways. Okay, here we go. You guys see this?
That looks great, Chris.
All right, so let me zoom in. I'm going to start over here on the west side of the project. So you see over here the R2D lot. The point of this project is one of the points of the project is to have connectivity to the R2D parking ride. We're in conversations with personnel from R2D to develop our design. And the design that seems to make the most sense is the approach that you see in front of you here. So you see that there's a walk that connects to the terminal, kind of on the south side of that island. We also talked about on the north side of that island, but it seems to make more sense to put it there. There's some landscaping, trees, and so forth. And then across the parking lot to the south, to this little island, likely that island would have to be expanded a bit to accommodate the sidewalk. Then to the east, across this little grassy area by the Bryant House, and then onto the town's right of way. You see that this little green area is just that. We've got it identified as a planter's bed, maybe beautification for the DDA. This sort of hash marked spot here is essentially a placeholder for what's been identified as the gateway sign in the DDA's master plan. And It's an interest, it's sort of an area of overlapping interest between multiple boards. SAB and ProSab wanted to do a trails map, for example, and the DDA wanted to do a map of area businesses for um, potentially, and they're working with their wayfinding group to establish what they want to do here. And it's actually not entirely decided that this is going to be the spot for the gateway sign. However, it is a placeholder for it. The other thing about these sort of hashed out areas is it's an opportunity to have a different type of material to provide contrast for the parking, for the sidewalk, to keep it, make it less conventional looking. It's an opportunity to add alternative materials. I've tasked the town's contracted sustainability coordinator to research materials for bricks that could be carbon neutral, possibly. And I hope to get information from him in February. We research things like hemp bricks, for example, and however, those won't work in this project. Sidewalk, but things like timber tree, just alternative things that may be more environmentally friendly, and like I said, uh, have carbon neutrality, I guess. So then and there's some bike racks identified here. So then the sidewalk continues to the south. And the idea here is to have one nice, clean um, connection from RTD Park and Ride to Netherlands downtown. Here at the corner of Jackson and West First Street is a telephone pole, and this is where we want to start burying the power lines. So from this pole all the way to the corner of the highway and First Street, then up here by the business connection, all that is being proposed to be buried, and it's in the design stage with Excel and in CenturyLink right now. You see here that we've identified parking on West First Street. To be clear, though, this is really a walking project and not a parking project. However, we want to identify an opportunity to develop parking on West First Street, and there is a desire among the DDA to develop parking around town. And considering that at the end of the day here, if we don't develop parking on West First, we actually end up with reduced parking in the area. And I'll explain that more in a moment. You see here on West First Street, we propose a one-way flow of traffic. Again, here on North Jefferson Street, one-way traffic. This is because we've identified congestion in this area. A lot of people are familiar with how North Jefferson functions when you have two-way traffic on this road, trying to park on it. It gets very crowded quickly, and then if you have delivery trucks and so forth, it just makes a lot of sense to make the flow of traffic one way and have it much smoother. We've presented this to several boards. It has received a lot of positive input, and so we've stuck with this one-way traffic flow throughout the design process. Okay, so up here on Jefferson, again, you see angled parking here. That was the latest input from the BZA. They really like angled parking. ProSab, some members of ProSab really like angled parking. And the idea, go ahead.
Can I jump in here with one question? Because this is a work session, so I want to encourage trustees also, if you have questions that come up, you just touched on one of the things that, I'm curious. You mentioned changing North Jefferson to one-way south flowing, and you said you've done outreach with the businesses. Have you talked to Kathmandu? Have you talked to Peak to Peak Liquors, the stores along there, and gotten their inputs on that idea?
The only person I've received, um, I guess, negative input is from Neds. They don't like the idea of one-way flow of traffic. Those are
Okay.
the only ones that have really have given me any kind of pushback on it. The folks at Kathmandu are aware of the change of traffic and uh, Kathmandu Plaza, like Karen at the liquor store. She's on the BZA or at least attended the last BZA meeting. She's aware of it. Um, and then Ron Mitchell, of course, has been part of it. I've reached out to the resident over here to talk about developing parking and, potentially they may want to create a driveway onto their parking lot. They think it makes sense. So
All right. Yeah, I was just curious if there'd been outreach to the local businesses and what their feedback had been. So thank you.
sure. Um, yeah, so again, it seems like having angled parking kind of lends to clearly identifying that this is a one-way flow of traffic. While I'm talking about that, I have this vehicle tracking pad that I think is in your packet. And so we have identified the flow of a truck through here to make sure that it can actually have good turning radiuses. This was a particular concern of Ned's. Thought that a large truck would have a spot here to be able to park. It would be uninhibited from um, uh, opposing traffic to be able to back in to this lot, then be able to pull on out and drive away. So there'd be obviously be a change of habits through here. And I'm showing you this version first because it seemed to be the most desirable. Now, perpendicular parking actually provides a few more spaces, but it does get a little bit tighter. Let's see, over here on this graphic, you see it's really just an example of a frontage zone. Obviously, we're not building this huge sidewalk with trees and so forth. But I wanted to give an example of a frontage zone, which is this area where this little table is here. And we have we sort of uh, knocked out, I guess, a spot, a 2 foot wide path next to the sidewalk to provide a place for a pedestrian to stand off to the side or a business to put a sandwich board for a sale on beer, for example, or something like that. Um, okay, so then we move down to North Jefferson Street into the Visitor Center parking lot. And we have these curb extensions. They've been separated a bit so that we can have a good turning radius for large vehicles. These hash marks are here to sort of provide definition. Similar to the stamped concrete that's in these other curb extensions on the highway. This darkened area for crosswalk is a raised crosswalk for traffic calming. This green area is a rain garden that's been identified. And as we get further into the project, we'll develop a stormwater management plan. But historically, the stormwater kind of comes down West First Street, ends up down here in front of the the realtor's office, and partially down here from Jefferson Street, and it kind of heads over here. So the idea was to capture it in this rain garden, have the overflow come along the curb into this box area that we've identified as a snow removal water quality basin. And in the town's master infrastructure plan, the stormwater section, and I think that's Section 5. There are some examples of stormwater quality designs, and so and they may not follow that exactly, but we could use that document to sort of guide us in how this functions as stormwater quality. And you see over here these boxes that have been identified. Again, these are placeholders for infrastructure for the undergrounding the power, because they still need some kind of cabinet, transformer access to the wires that are buried underground. And so I'll be coming back to the BOT for an easement that Excel will require to place their equipment on this property. This is town property here. It's kind of off to the side so that they'll accommodate burying these power lines. In this particular version, you see now these bold black lines, if it's not perfectly clear, this is the right of way. See over here by the business connection, the building's actually in the right of way, several feet there. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. It's like Marianne's or the realtor's office is also, as all of you know, it's in the right of way a little bit there. Well, down here in front of Town Hall, what happens is the sidewalk actually goes onto Town Hall's property and onto Ned's property. It's desirable among the property owner and Ned's to maintain as much parking in front of their business as possible. We had considered angled parking as exists right now, but what happens is it pushes the cars out into the parking lot too far, and it creates this very sort of jogged, uneven flow of traffic and kind of tight as it comes around those parking spots across Jefferson Street and continuing down West First Street. By keeping this a parallel parking zone, it creates a nice smooth linear direction of flow of traffic, and that's why we kept this. And then this area here can still be a loading zone or staff parking. So what happens here is we lose about 8 or 7 spaces in this particular scenario. And let me show you graphic here. The other thing that design does is it helps better separate pedestrians from cars. You see the cars kind of overhang the sidewalk here and hit these signs. And so in order to avoid that, having that parallel parking does create a little bit more separation. Now, we are going to be meeting with the property owner of Ned's, and this portion of the project really relies on mutual cooperation to be able to put the sidewalk on their property. I have a version here further down. I'll show it to you. Well, I'll just show it to you now. See here, this version is always going to be the fallback position of the town, which is if we're not able to come to terms with Ned's, the property owner of Ned's, then we can return the sidewalk back into the town's right of way and continue this project. The downside, obviously, of that is that the parking will be eliminated. I suppose the positive side is that we have truly respect boundaries of the town's project and the nearby property owners. And again, we have that separation of pedestrians from cars. It's just not ideal when it comes to providing parking, which is one of the things in the OPR. So this is the desired format. We have down here electric charging stations. We did secure a high-speed electric charging station to place over here. And then we want to move the town's single-phase uh, parking EV charging station over here as well. So those 4 spaces will be provided right here. Um, this spot here is identified for wayfinding. Again, the other thing that we did with the DDA and ProSAP and SAB is started a committee to communicate with them as they are evolving their wayfinding process, because again, this funding will cover wayfinding, and so we'll be able to add some of what they want to do to this project. So I've asked the DDA to communicate with the other boards and to sort of prioritize what they want to do here first. I think I've covered it. So again, this is angled parking. If I go up,
I had a question.
go for it. Yep. Go ahead.
I think we lost Tanya's connection right as she was asking the question.
Oh, do you guys hear me?
Yep.
You're back right now. Go for it, Tanya.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to the parking in the visitor center. On the south side there by the creek side, are those parking spots or not? Because they're not in purple.
Those are parking spots.
Okay.
Those,
So it's
those don't change at all. We had
again.
Those don't change at all. We had highlighted the spots here in the middle.
Oh, but are they going to be nice?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Oh, me? I'm sorry. Of course, I'm cutting out right when I have a question. Is it going to be improved though? That area, of course, of the parking lot.
Yeah. So the DDA. This is in collaboration with the DDA. So apologize, I forgot to mention that the DDA is going to fund repaving Jefferson Street and repaving the visitor center parking lot. We've identified, sort of highlighted these spaces.
That's not part of the grant. Okay.
It's not. There's kind of two projects in parallel with each other. This is really, initially, the funding included paving, but at the 11th hour, CDOT had said that the paving of a local road does not qualify or fit within this particular funding, and we had to pull that out of the project. It was originally,
gotcha.
yeah, it was a bummer. It was originally an over $2 million project, but we had to pull the paving out of it. So unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, I went to the DDA, explained the dilemma with the town, because we still did have $1.5 million to do this project. However, I couldn't use it on paving, which it doesn't make sense to do a sidewalk and not actually fix the street. So the DDA did agree to fix North Jefferson and the Visitor Center parking lot. They are also considering West First Street and developing these parking spaces. That hasn't been decided yet. But I wanted to present to them the opportunity to develop those spaces.
So those new spaces on West First Street would not be covered under the grant. That would come also out of the DDA budget.
That's correct.
Okay. And just one last question. Overall, are we breaking even with parking spots if we include those West First ones, or are we gaining any, or what's the situation?
It ends up being, with West First, it ends up being a net gain.
Okay.
If we don't include West First, we lose spaces. right on the cusp.
Yeah, because it's in front of Ned's and the town hall, right?
Exactly.
You said we
Yes.
lose like 6 or 7 there.
Yes.
Okay. And about the going in the sidewalk encroaching onto Ned's area, there already is a sidewalk there. So are you saying that that sidewalk would get ripped out and turned into parking spots? Or I'm just a little confused because there seems to be a nice sidewalk right there and some nice rock work along the edge of Ned's.
The rock work would remain untouched.
Okay.
The sidewalk could be reclaimed if Neds didn't want to have the sidewalk on their property, and we would put the sidewalk back
Oh,
into the right of way.
I see. But there is a sidewalk already there. So is that sidewalk that's already there, that's already existing in Ned's right away? The one
It
that's
technically belongs to Neds.
gotcha. All right. So nothing will change unless they don't agree, and then that sidewalk would go.
Yes.
Or no, the parking would go.
The parking would go in the sidewalk.
Sidewalk would stay.
We'd move the
Oh, because
sidewalk.
it's on the street. I gotcha. Okay. I'm just trying to get it all figured out in my head. Thank you.
Sure. We have discussed options with the town's attorney and have a fair game plan to discuss with Neds how we could work together to keep the sidewalk on their property if that's what they desire. And so we have a meeting next week. And I'll keep you guys posted on how it goes.
Great. Thank you.
Also, sure. Also, in this version, you see it's all perpendicular parking. You do get more spaces when you keep them perpendicular. Just a few more, but you do get more. And then this version here in the center.
But it's a lot easier. I don't parallel park very well personally, but
Yeah. Any other questions? That is the project. Essentially, I don't have anything else to present to you guys tonight. So,
Actually, Chris, I have a question. How many total charging stations will we have? Is it 2 or 3?
two. Well, 4. Two ports, but 4 charging cables.
Okay, good. That's a major improvement. Thank you.
And you said that those new charging stations are the 3-phase higher voltage versus what we have currently in place, right?
Just one of them will be.
One of them, okay.
Yeah, we'll move our existing one over there, and then
Uh-huh.
we'll have a 3-phase high-speed charging station.
Very cool. All right, so thank you, Chris. It was a really well done presentation. I think it really wrapped up kind of where things are. And so I think what we're really looking for from tonight is thoughts from the board. We've been presented this, and the idea would be to bring this back to us as an action item in a near future meeting. Because what are the next steps, Chris? I know there's a couple of hoops we have to jump through because this is CDOT and somewhat out of our control. So if we were to want to move forward and bring this forward at a, say our next meeting, is that a good timeline? When would we start seeing the next steps taken down in this area?
Yeah, so the next step here is, I mentioned there's a design in process right now for the burying the underground. I'd like to move forward on that design in the spring. It could take up to 12 weeks to move their design through their process, and collaborating with CenturyLink can get complicated. And so I'll be coming back to the DDA, to the BOT, like I said, for an easement for those, the charging or the electrical infrastructure. The next step with CDOT is what they call an FIR, um, for internal review, I think, or first internal review. And it's essentially a 30% design. And so if we're at a spot here that we like, and I can move forward with at least 30%, then that's the next stage. And Nathan, do you think the next meeting's too early, or do we have some other things to work out before we bring this to CDOT?
Yeah, I think the next step for us is, we are kind of in the background of these figures, developing a set of documents, as Chris mentioned, the FIR set, and then we go towards a FOR set, and that's their for office review set. So in the background, we're developing a set of a full set of drawings, which include some obviously this information, and I think it's important for us to figure out what design or what layout we want to incorporate into that set that will go to CDOT. That drawing set will also include all the pertinent details, additional information on the grading and drainage, and all the horizontal control information as well, with additional dimensioning, um, parking layouts, and the details associated with a lot of that stuff too.
Does the BOT have any input on the layout of the parking? I do want to make a point that it's really about striping more than anything. You do see the curb extension over by the liquor store does change a little bit, but essentially angled parking is just about striping. Is there any input on that?
So, Chris, this is Julian.
Well,
I
I
see.
did.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, Julian.
No, go right ahead.
Just wondered if you yourself, Chris, had an opinion regarding this, angled versus not parallel. What's the way to say it? Particular.
Yeah.
Straight in. It does seem like it would be easier on a one-way street to be angled, but
That's what I think too, and it makes it a little bit clearer for the driver to realize that it's a one-way street. I think it's more obvious. Obviously, we'll provide signage, and clear signage is important, especially when we're changing historical traffic flows in the area. But I kind of like the flow of angled parking like this. Works well on First Street.
Yeah, I was going to agree. I was going to agree with Eric. I like the angled better, but I understand that if we're running short of spaces, we may have to go with straight in parking. And I understand that this isn't finalized because we're still waiting on a response from NEDS. And if NEDS says no, then we may end up with no parking in front of NEDS. That may be something we're stuck with if I'm reading all of this correctly. And
That's
so,
correct.
yeah, we'll have to come back. Yeah, this is not finalized yet, and I understand that. I guess I just add my vote for the diagonal parking. It seems a little easier to manage, and I do like the idea that it makes it clearer that this is a one-way street. I have a question for Nathan. I was just for fun reading through a lot of the kind of legalese type wording in the various documents about this, and one of them was saying that it will not go over budget, which is great. But I was just kind of curious if you could explain to us, Nathan, what does JVA do to deal with the unexpected? In a situation like this, what are your procedures for saying, oh, the concrete didn't come in, now we have to go with a more expensive concrete or something? What is your process there? Just curious.
Well, I guess when it comes down to that portion, we're talking about the bidding stage. So, with this being a CDOT process, again, or a CDOT grant, that follows a CDOT process, and they've got basically a manual on kind of the direction in which we would take this project. As it is CDOT as well, it would have to go out to bid, and we would get, hopefully we would solicit to, as many contractors as possible. We'd go out publicly to bid. Any contractor can bid on it, and I think at the end of the day, if we fall within the budget, then we select, the bidder of choice. Typically the lowest responsive bidder is selected. I think if it does go over budget, I've seen this happen before too, and sometime that can just delay the process. Maybe it's timing of the bid. If it goes out in the middle of summer, contractors are busy. They might have all the work they need, and they're not looking for additional jobs. So a lot of times timing can affect that. And if that's the case, the bid can be it can be rebid, basically saying that, hey, the funds don't cover the costs required to do the work, and it could be rebid at a later date, and that is a possibility. Another option is value engineering, which is kind of a term used to describe, looking for alternative means to lessen the price, whether that's material, sourcing materials, or just putting in kind of alternates too that say, we're going to remove or reduce the scope of work.
So Nathan,
should this
actually, I did mention cost as my variable, and that limited my question too much. I'm actually meaning, what happens if the person who's bid on delivering whatever the part of this construction is fails to deliver? Undoubtedly, there is a process whereby there are contingency plans for such situations, and I was more curious about that process. So, from what you've just said, it sounds like if we are going to stay within budget, then we are prepared to give on completion date. Is that essentially what you're saying? It may just take longer than we were thinking.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think another thing when it comes to the budgeting, we have a certain amount of funds that are set in stone,
Mhm.
and I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure this project probably falls under that budget to a certain extent, and then have a built-in contingency with it. So, we all know
Okay.
that contractors are, they're good at nitpicking things, or looking for change orders here and there, and we also know that there's a lot of unforeseen conditions that could
Mhm.
arise. Whether that's, it could be everything from weather, it could be the soil underneath of the sidewalk, it could be just, unforeseen conditions of any sort. And, I think, having a contingency built in, and then also making that a factor to the contractor. I mean, typically they know that there's a budget, and
Mhm.
if it's a grant, they know that there's nothing beyond that. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's just something we have to make, clear to ourselves, but also clear to any prospective bidders that, this is the project, and if it's outside of the budget, it's just not going to take place. And that kind of gives them, an understanding of what to expect, but also, gives us the leverage to maintain that budget, and try to keep a little contingency there for the what ifs that could come up.
Okay. Thank you.
Nathan, do you have a sense, just sort of a knee-jerk sense um, of the project that we're showing here tonight? Does it seem like it's going to fit within the allotted amount of funds that we have?
Right now, we are working on an estimate. I don't have that in front of me, which I apologize for, but I think overall the scope of work isn't overly complicated. We're looking at a lot of flat work. There's some additional grading. There's a lot of concrete work, and there's some potential repaving of the streets, in part with that. Again, this CDOT grant won't cover repaving entire streets, but if we're modifying and adding a curb, we're going to have to make a connection, and thus, that CDOT grant can cover certain, smaller portions. Let's say the grades are being modified. We're not doing anything really underground here. We're not moving any, there's no real underground work, or water lines, not too much storm other than the rain gardens. And I think generally speaking, the concrete is probably the biggest ticket item at this point. And we can also look at, various options, as Chris mentioned, looking at, different sustainable solutions. Obviously, basic concrete is, the cheapest, your standard grade concrete that you see everywhere. Colored concrete adds an additional cost. So I think once we identify those those areas, whether we're going to do, colored concrete, stamped concrete, etc., that could change the pricing a little bit. But as a whole, we've got, over $1 million for construction, prior to a contingency being built into that overall number. And I think, pricing wise, I think we're feeling pretty good that this could all fit within the current budget and the scope that we have in front of us right here.
Do we have questions? Yeah, there we go. That was looking for it. Alan, go for it.
Yeah, I think the project's real sensitive to pedestrians, and I think bicycles could work in the streets and things. What about bicycle racks? Do we have any plans for additional bicycle rack?
Yeah, over by the RTD, we've identified a spot to put bicycle racks. Also did a little bit of research with RTD to understand they actually have, let me move this over, they actually have bicycle lockers over there. And so I had asked them, how often are they filled? Because they're actually rented. And they're rarely ever full or at capacity. So it didn't really make sense to add more lockers that don't seem to currently get used. But there's always an opportunity to add them later. So we have over by this quote unquote gateway sign, bike staging over there. And then also we could consider bike staging over by Town Hall.
Okay. So there'll be some places for people to lock up their bikes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we have had a discussion about types of bike locks to use. I think what is very common, I think there's a variety of different types, but there's also a variety of different bikes. And so what we've seen work best are basically the inverted U shape ones, which are also at the RTD park and ride area. Just basically that simple inverted U. I think that's what we were currently leaning towards, just because it's simple. It allows for a variety of bikes being locked to it. It doesn't restrict any type of weird geometry in a bike frame to connect to it. But I think we're also researching a few a couple ideas, and I know just seeing some of those older style where you slide the front tire through, they just don't tend to work as well as they used to, since bikes have so many different shapes and sizes these days. So I think the inverted U was kind of the go-to, and then also to place them in rather visible locations where folks are going to feel comfortable with leaving their bikes too, and not hidden behind in some corner somewhere too. So I think the goal is to keep them visible and keep it simple to make sure they are usable and they're not outdated in a few years.
So I think we've, I just want to open this up because I think there's a couple trustees who haven't heard questions from. You guys, if you have them, speak up. If you don't, that's cool too. Just want to make sure you guys have an opportunity, that everyone has an opportunity to speak.
Just had a couple questions about potential hash marked alternative material areas. We currently plow our sidewalks with the front end loader, right? And that just has a bucket, or is that a rubber blade that we use for snow removal?
Yeah, it's actually a regular plow edge. We do use a bucket sometimes. And that's the sidewalk tractor, but we actually have a rubber plow edge on our plow bucket for sidewalk maintenance. And also these sidewalks are 8 foot wide, so they're a lot wider than the existing sidewalk there now. So there's lots of room.
So the 8 foot wide is why we would lose the parking in front of Ned's and kind of reduce down to 4 parallel parking. I would say I'm highly in favor of the one-way street on North Jefferson, West First, with the diagonal parking. There's quite a few large trucks in town I don't have the biggest truck, but I know I have a hard time getting into that perpendicular parking and getting out. And that a lot of the time it ends up as diagonal parking anyway during the wintertime, especially. I guess my only concern would be potential area for snow storage on some of our larger storms. I know this winter we haven't really had a large snowstorm, but if we were to make this a one-way street, are you confident we would be able to actually remove the snow and have a place to store that snow while it melts?
Yeah, so the the spots themselves would serve as snow storage in the immediate um, time when we're initially plowing the snow. And then afterwards, we could move the snow to the um, south side of the visitor center parking lot. Usually, like in the visitor center parking lot, we kind of angle it all over to there. But then up there on West First Street, it's not very organized, and there's a lot of resident parking and disjointed parking over there. And so it can get difficult to have a nice orderly way of removing snow. On West First Street, likely we push it all over to the corner of Jackson and First. The Visitor Center parking lot, it all be pushed into the south. Often we pick it up over the guardrail and put it off into the creek. But we really would like to utilize the stormwater quality area to store snow and let it melt naturally. And then on North Jefferson, we usually leave it over there kind of by the entrance of the Kathmandu. But with the change that's happening over here, likely the piles of snow will be closer to the north end of the parking lot. So we'd have to change our habits for removing snow. But for large snow events, it's inevitable that we're going to have piles of snow everywhere. It's after that when we're going to have to manage it.
Okay, that would be pretty much my only question. And I guess I like the diagonal parking. I have my concerns about the parallel parking in front of Ned's. It seems like a large loss of parking, but if we're going with the 8-foot sidewalks, we really don't have an option, do we?
We don't. That is a specified multimodal sidewalk, which is what this project funding is for. So it must be 8 feet.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Jonathan. Of course, everyone can speak up here. I'm just looking at the clock. We've got about 5 minutes here before our regularly scheduled meeting. For I think this plan is really coming together well. I know you said you've got your meeting with Ned's coming up here soon regarding the parking situation, sidewalk situation in front of there. I guess I would just say I'd love to see this come before the Board of Trustees as soon as you'd like, as soon as you're ready, as soon as you think fits into the schedule with all the other moving pieces. And I would think that might be a great opportunity to really get some public input on the the straight in versus diagonal parking issue. I think it sounds like we're all pretty well agreed that the one way is not a big deal, but I think we want to make sure we get that information out to the public, that might be a change coming. And also just, more details about the increased number of potential parking spaces coming out of this project, the work you guys are doing. I'm looking forward to seeing this come before the full Board of Trustees as an action item to move on to the next step.
All right, cool.
Can I make a quick comment?
Oh.
I have a quick comment real quick.
Yeah, Tanya.
I'm a bit concerned about the timing with COVID and the necessity of restaurants using all the outdoor space and everything. How long will the project take, and how long will it be impacting all the restaurants and businesses who utilize the visitor parking center? Like, any idea timeline on that, and can it be pushed back at all?
Well, it's a bit of an unknown. And as far as the undergrounding the electric, I don't think that's a really complicated job. A week or two, of work. I think, to the point of doing this during a pandemic, it's almost good timing if we could do it during a really slow time of year when there's not a lot going on. I'd hate to be doing this project when tourism's really kicking in. However,
Yeah,
that could be the case, I mean, if we're talking about summer, um, it could be impactful. I've talked about potentially phasing the project in such a way to, mitigate the impacts all at once to the area businesses. Paving Jefferson and paving the visitor center parking lot and striping, all that is, it really is going to be impactful. So I'm not really sure. It's tough to answer that. Um, it's tough to answer. Nathan, do you have a sense for timing on this?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I'd like to see this project completed in 2 to 3 months, in terms of overall, like the general construction. There always are little residual things, the smaller items that can be placed at a later date. But I think as Chris mentioned, um, it could be phased in a way that, kind of works through certain sections and doesn't affect the entire area at one time. That way you can maintain, certain parking patterns and pedestrian walking patterns, and kind of create a phased detour plan that would accommodate the time of year and everything like that too. But ideally, to do a project like this, it's always to the benefit to do it in the summer or do it when the weather is, the best, which is unfortunately usually the busiest time when folks are outside as well. So I think as we move forward, especially from this particular, kind of planning phase to more of a construction set of documents, we do want to do some research on, the idea of phasing and what we can do to minimize the impact and disturbance to the area and to the local businesses and residents.
okay, thank you.
And then, Mayor, I'd like to sort of aim for maybe the last meeting of February. That gives us a whole month to work through trying to get this out, get more of this out to the public as much as possible. And then because CDOT does take time to go through their FIR process, and if we did want to try to get this moving in the summer, we really need all that time. So,
Right.
kind of aiming, last week of February.
All right. Well, I think we can work with town staff and the agendas to get it slotted in there. And again, thank you so much. Thank you, Nathan, for calling in tonight and answering questions.
Yeah,
I'm sure we could keep talking to you guys for a little bit longer, but it's 1 minute till 7, so I think we need to call the end of this work session and prepare for the next round of meeting.
And I'll throw in one more piece of information, just as we say FIR, FOR, that's kind of the CDOT term, but FIR is basically a 30% drawing set and FOR is 90. So, even at that early stage, we're still coordinating a lot with CDOT in the background. We're moving towards that 90% set, but we've got some flexibility still to manipulate the layout and make changes as we go too. So I just want to kind of put more of a percentage base to that timeline.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Give everyone a chance here to step away for 1 or 2 minutes to refill water bottles and take a break, and then we will call to order our normal meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Chris.
For those who have called in, we're just taking a couple more minutes for people to come back from water breaks after our work session, and then we will call to order our Board of Trustees meeting.
Hello?
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 Hi.
Is this Miranda?
No, this is May. I just am trying to get set up on this meeting.
So
Welcome,
that's,
May. Yep.
How did I
We
get
can hear you,
sent
May.
through to you?
Okay, now I need to make sure I know how to mute it.
Are you on the computer or the phone, May?
I'm on the computer.
Okay, great. Yeah, just a reminder for everyone, if you are one of the call-in users or on the phone, it's *6 to mute or unmute yourself. That's something we can't do from this end. So when we have public comment or the like, if you'd like to chime in, *6 is your friend.
Hi, Jill.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
All right. Well, according to my clock, it is 7:05 p.m. And so I would say let us call to order this meeting of the Netherlands on January 19th, 2021. Miranda, if you would please call the roll.
Mayor Larson,
Here.
Trustee Taylor,
Here.
Trustee Apt,
Here.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Here.
Trustee Danforth,
Here.
Trustee Corbelin.
Here.
All right. Thank you all very much. Relatively short agenda, but a lot of people who have called in or joined. So welcome everyone to the Nederland Board of Trustees. We have 3 items on the consent agenda tonight: the minutes, the warrants, and the letter of agreement with our sustainability coordinator for his next year of services. Anyone from the board have questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Or a motion
I'll make a
regarding
motion.
this?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I second the motion. Julian?
We have a motion and a second. Miranda, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corbelin,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
All right, consent agenda passes. Moving on to public comment section of our meeting. If anyone would like to speak on any item that is not on our agenda this evening, now would be your opportunity for 3 minutes. Raise your hand, wave on the video, just start speaking, somehow catch our attention, and then you'll have 3 minutes. Not hearing or seeing any. We will move on to our first informational item tonight, which is looking at 2018 building code updates. And this is going to be introduced to us this evening by Miranda and Rick Hendrickson.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Larson. So tonight, we just wanted to briefly talk to the board about our interest in moving forward with adopting 2018 building codes. So in the packet, you'll see that the town, in collaboration with the Fire Protection District, have discussed the need for updating the codes to 2018 standards. Currently, we're adhering to 2012 codes. We feel that it's important just to ensure the health and safety of our structures throughout town. So in the packet, you'll see I've listed all of the codes that would be updated to 2018. The town did embark on the adoption of 2012 back in 2016, so we're just seeking to now do the next round, and are just really asking if the board has questions as we move forward. Our plan is as follows. We have an administrative committee that consists of myself, Karen Garrity, Cynthia Bakke, Chris Pelletier, and Rick Henrickson, who are working on just kind of the initial phases of the changes that would be needed. The plan is then to have Safe Built come before the Board of Trustees to put together a PowerPoint presentation that highlights the changes between 2012 code and 2018. We did a similar presentation back when we moved from 06 to 2012 standards. Following that presentation, then we would focus really heavily on public vetting, doing presentations to boards and commissions, and also having public charrettes that would likely be virtual, but it kind of just depends on where we are under COVID guidelines. So that's our plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Rick, who will give a little bit more information.
Good evening. Everybody hear me okay?
Welcome, Rick.
Good evening. Yeah, just want to go over a couple things kind of quick here that we're not looking for a big, long discussion tonight, but just kind of give you the basic information. So the codes come out every 3 years. If you heard, we went from 2006 to 2012 back in 15, 16, but there were codes in between those. So we're kind of skipping the 2015 version and looking at the 2018 now. And what happens with this is we use the International Code Council's codes, and they've got committees that work on this pretty much year round for forever. And every 3 years, they recommend changes to the codes, and they look at large fires that have occurred, especially ones with injuries or loss of life, and they try to adapt codes to better address those if there were code issues. They look at changes in technology. They look at new testing. They look at new building materials that come out and try to work that all into those codes, and just to make as safe as they can. And of course, that means that every year the books get thicker. There is a whole set of these, and they all work together. So it doesn't really work to say adopt a 2018 fire code, but keep a 2012 building code because like I said, they work together and they have a lot of common material in them. When we started looking at this, the big changes that we saw that's in the building code and the fire code was they've added a new chapter on energy storage systems and energy systems. So it used to be somebody wants to put solar on, you'd be picking through different chapters in the book to try to find the information. So they've now put that all in one chapter. They've seen extraction industries like the hemp procedurals. Those have just exploded across the country. So now there's a whole chapter on that, rather than picking through hazmat and other chapters trying to find what you're looking for. So that's going to really help with those. They've added a section, which is a part of a chapter on food trucks, which there really wasn't a lot on that before. Well, we're seeing a huge increase all over with food trucks. So this is going to help look at those for safety and fire hazard and such. So those are kind of the big reasons why we're looking at changes. there's a whole lot of information out there that we'll be getting from Safe Build, and there's books out there that highlight changes between the 2012 and the 2015. Then again, what you have up there is the changes from 15 to 18. Kind of highlight some of those changes, and not all those changes mean more money to a builder. A lot of them are either clarification, or in some cases realizing they can do things more efficiently, more safely, without really any extra cost. So I think they do a really good job of looking through those things. Specific changes that we want to look at in the fire code, most of it is administrative. The changes we're looking at to what the 2018 code is, because we're going to look at some amendments to those codes. Like I said, a lot of it is administrative, looking at the possibility of allowing slash burns in town, which is something that has been kind of allowed in town code, but not clear. So this would help clear this up. And that's not much in the fire code as far as amending what the 2018 says. The biggest changes that we're looking at, or amendments to that code, are in the residential code. And two things with that is, one, as we did with the 2012 code, is adopting some of the wildland urban interface language for building construction for 1 and 2 family residences for fire protection, which is more fire resistant exteriors. And what we'd like to do with this one, or what we're looking at right now, is adopting pretty much what Boulder County is doing. So for builders and residents, they're looking at basically the same code, whether they're building on Ridge Road or in town, and they're not having to poke around for different things, trying to figure out where they are and which code they have to meet. The other thing is, in 2012, they amended out the fire sprinkler requirements in residential 1 and 2 family and townhomes. We'd like to bring that back in. As most of you know, we've had a couple of structure fires in town over the last few years. Probably most, what everybody remembers, is the one out on Alpine in July. That house, by a quirk of old code, had a fire sprinkler system in it, and that system probably prevented a much greater disaster there. Had that house burned and what was in that house, and could have affected a lot more houses around it. As it was, it had 2 sprinklers that went off. It put out the fire right away, probably also prevented some further injury to people in the house, which is really what the residential systems are aimed at. 2 other previous ones over the last few years did not have sprinkler systems and had significant damage to the houses. In one case, 2 dogs were killed. Another one was almost 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. And that, maybe it wasn't quite that long ago, I don't remember for sure. Also out in Big Springs, but they're just now getting rebuilt to the point where it looks like it's almost livable. In those cases, had there been fire sprinkler systems in those houses, that would have been a big difference in how those fires were fought and how much damage there was. So certainly something we want to look at here. That's pretty much all I have for kind of an overview of it. And if there's any questions.
Well, thanks, Rick, that you answered the questions I had in your talk. So very good. Other trustees, Alan, do you have any questions for Rick or Miranda regarding the code updates?
Yeah, my only question would be, I'm glad we're updating in terms of fire issues. What about energy efficiency? That was mentioned in the codes. About insulation and things of that nature.
So there is an energy conservation code that will be 2018. Rick, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right. I think Miranda just said it there. The other thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to right at the top, is that 99% of these codes apply only to new construction or significant remodels, so that people are not going to have to upgrade their house. They're not going to have to upgrade their business, with some very minor exceptions to that. And you find those in the existing building code, which is also one of the ones we want to update. And that's in the list and has some highlights on there.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, I realize people don't have to change what already exists. In the new housing, are we asking for more insulation or things that make the houses more energy efficient for the homeowner?
So we have worked with, so Hunter, I know is Hunter and Garrett, I believe, are both on this call. So we are working with them, and maybe we'll partner on some green building standards. Obviously, we're at the very beginning phases. So the code itself will have some specific adoptions, but there may be design standards that focus more on sustainability efforts. I'm not sure we're far enough along to comment, but it's very much a part of the process, Alan, that we're going to look into is the sustainability side of this.
Okay.
Eric, any questions?
No questions from me. This looks logical and looks good.
Okay. Jonathan?
A few questions. Are we going to retain the right to amend certain aspects of the 2018 code as we did when we adopted the 2012 code?
Yes. Typically, we do that through the adoption process as we make those amendments then, but it could be done later as well.
So I'm seeing the committee is largely made up of town staff and our fire protection district staff members as well. I see no intent to have local builders be a part of this committee when looking at these codes. Is that something that we could incorporate into this process?
So so the committee is really just working on the draft ordinance changes. So to clarify, we'll be the ones really marking up the current ordinance. The plan is then to do a series of public charrettes and outreach where we would be inviting builders to be a part of further discussion. We felt like it didn't make sense to have them in the nitty gritty word changes and more so in kind of the visioning process, how we move forward.
Okay, that's good. With regards to fire-resistant material, are we talking requiring fire treating all exterior siding, or are we basically just generally recommending hardy? I know in one of the PUDs we recently discussed, there was questions about, the look of hardy, and we're going to have to really focus on this balance in Nederland between architecture, design features, and fire-resistant material. I'm also curious about decks because in reality, there's only two. EPA decking is the only actual fire-resistant decking. Beyond that, in terms of the other various decking forms that are composites, a lot of people believe Trex decking is fire resistant. It's not. Only TimberTech has developed and passed codes in terms of fire resistance. So I guess I look at this from a builder perspective, and while we say there's not more money to the contractors, there definitely is a large increase in cost of building a house here. If you include the fire suppression systems, the ERVs, which are the mechanical ventilation systems, and the fire resistant materials, you're looking at adding on anywhere from $35,000 to $40,000 to every new house built in Ned. Now, the more houses that get built in Ned at increased costs, when you look at our PFI fees, our town tap fees, that just drives the cost of housing up more. So my only concern with this is balancing it with the other priorities in town of affordable housing. There comes a point at a small town we have to really line everything up and really look at where's the best bang for the buck. So while this might seem logical and prudent from just looking at it in isolation of updating our building codes, we're going to have to take this in perspective with some of our other priorities as a town, such as affordable housing. If we all of a sudden start requiring fire suppression systems, all fire resistant housing, and a 100% thermal seal with ERVs doing the ventilation on houses, drastically increase the cost of building a house in Ned in just one fell swoop. So I have those concerns, and I'd just ask whoever's working on this be mindful of that.
I have a question. This is Trustee Danforth. I'm wondering, since we're going to 2018, you said this gets updated every 3 years. When does the 2021 come out? Should we potentially be discussing those and jump right to the current version?
That's a good question. The 2021 codes actually just came out. I heard recently via email that you can actually order a copy of it now and you'll actually get it because it just came out. There are people who know what's all in it and know all the changes, but for the most part, most communities run somewhere between 2 and 5 years behind the latest code. And that's to let those codes come out, people get a good look at them, really evaluate what's in them, rather than just jumping headlong into it. For instance, City of Boulder just went to the 2018 codes this past summer. So we're not that far off of some of our bigger neighbors. I haven't heard of anybody that's going to the 21 or even talking about it yet.
Okay. So your recommendation is to wait on the 2021, because I am on their website right now, and it looks like they have a bunch of reviews and committee hearings and public comments that continue on even through 2022.
Right.
And so I guess that's the reason why you'd want to wait, is for all these extra vetting and changes that might occur.
Exactly. That's it.
This is Trustee Taylor. That's what we do with software too. You let the version settle first.
That answer all your questions, Lindsay?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Julian, did you have any?
No, I looked over the write-up. I'm no expert in this area, but everything looked pretty reasonable to me. I certainly take what Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover said to heart, that we certainly want to follow the code as far as we possibly can, and yet if we run into codes that are going to make housing unaffordable here, we may need to temper that a bit. So other than that, everything looks fine to me.
Very good. Tanya, questions or comments?
No, I mean, I'm personally all for it. I know it's going to increase the cost of building a home, but we live in a fire area. If people want to live here, that's just kind of the price is going to have to get paid, just like we are clear cutting the forest for the same reasons and all those different things. It's because of the climate change and where we live. So I think this is what we need to do. I wish we could retrofit every house in Ned, really, but thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. I do have one question for you, Rick, and also for Miranda, is sort of what is the process on this? What happens next?
So next will be Safe Built coming before you with a presentation while the committee also kind of works on some of that ordinance, some of the wording changes. That's going to be our next step. And Dan with Safe Built has been working with Rick. And so the hope is that we could ideally do that next month. So you can have a more comprehensive review of the difference between our current code and 2018 proposal.
Okay, and so that would be the opportunity then to address some of Jonathan's concerns. And
Yes.
we'll be able to look at individual things and say, maybe do a little mix and match if that makes sense, that kind of thing.
And we'll have additional public charrettes and a separate meeting schedule, kind of similar to how we almost approached GOCO the first round, just having a ton of meetings people can attend to give their feedback. Our hope is to be able to maybe adopt the ordinance changes by summer. So we expect 6+ months going into this to make sure we are getting quality public feedback before any adoption.
Great. Any trustees, last thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover's comments don't necessarily mean that we have to make our houses unsafe. It could be that we can trade off building the house so that it is extremely resistant to fire against assuring that if the house is not built to that part of the code, trees are cleared away from the house at a certain distance or certain other things. So I think there are ways we could assure safety without necessarily requiring those specific rigorous building requirements. I'm not sure if that's the case in every case, but I certainly know that for our house that was built in 1970, the insurance company said, you know what, you'll be all right if you cut down a whole bunch of trees. And we did. And so I'm hopeful that we can focus on safety as a priority, but also be able to perhaps offer alternative, somewhat less expensive options for certain types of housing. Just a thought.
Agreed. Anyone else?
I want to respond to that real quick, that in most of the homes in the town of Ned, they're so close together that your neighbors' trees are sometimes within 20 or 30 feet of your home. So that's a solution for some of the outskirts, but not necessarily for most homes in town of Ned. But it's a good idea.
And I agree. But on a case-by-case basis, there may be some other options. So
I think there's lots of things we can look at in there, and some of the requirements for building construction are already in our existing code and already being followed for residences. So I don't think that's going to be a huge change.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction to this, and we look forward to having this come back again at future meetings, and then also all the opportunity for public comment or charrettes and public meetings and all the ways we try and gather it. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you.
Moving on this evening, we have two actions at the recommendation of our Deputy Town Administrator. We're noticing that we actually have everyone for the Envision 2030 committee, all those who have applied to be part of that committee, are online. So I'd like to propose that we move the Envision 2030 committee action item first before the GOCO grant, as we've got everyone here. And so we'll tackle 6.2 first, unless I hear an outroar of disagreement from the Board of Trustees.
Trustee Taylor, fine with me.
Very good. And I think Miranda is going to introduce this one to us, though I think at this point we've all gotten fairly comfortable with the idea of what we're trying to do with Envision 2030. We just want to know what the next steps are.
Yes, I will be quick. So we released applications for the Envision 2030 committee on the 23rd of December with a due date of the 13th. We have a recommended makeup of the committee, which consists of a handful of members from the community, external agencies, and then a member from each of the boards or commissions. I've gone over kind of the request is that anyone who's interested in applying be able to dedicate 2 to 4 hours per week, and that the meetings will occur bi-weekly, which all the applicants are aware. So ultimately 14 people had ended up applying, and I've listed them here. You'll see we didn't get a person from every board and commission. ProSav and SAV have yet to identify a representative. Received 2 applications from community agency members, and then the rest are community members. I want to clarify that we did not specify that they must live in town. Obviously, there are plenty of people who live outside of the community who have a vested interest in Nederland. So you'll note that there's a diverse group. Sarah Martin is the one person who had submitted her application late Friday night. So I added it in for a total of 14. And really, the question before you is, of these applicants, who are you interested in putting on the committee? And as Mayor Larson said, I believe we have all of them. I'm not entirely sure who the call-in users are, but I've asked them all to be here should you have questions and if you'd like them to speak to why they're interested.
Thank you, Miranda. And what I really want to start with is to the 14 people who have applied, thank you. As Miranda said, this is definitely something that is not restricted to members or people who live within town limits, because we know that we're a community that goes outside our town limits, and this is a great opportunity to get input from our wider community. And I really appreciate all of 14 people who have stepped up and said that they were interested in serving on yet another, at this point, Zoom committee meeting. I know that we're all just loving the Zoom life that is ahead of us right now. And I appreciate that so many people are willing to step up and tackle this, because this is one of those guiding documents for the town. We've relied heavily on Envision 2020 over the last almost 10 years now. And I hope Envision 2030 can be that same kind of guiding document for the town of Nederland going forward, well past when probably all of us on this board have moved on by choice or by term limits. So this is a great opportunity, and I really appreciate everyone who's stepped up. And I'd like to open by just proposing that we don't restrict this in any such way by simply accepting all 14 applicants as members of the Envision 2030 steering committee. I think I've been looking at the applications, and I think it's a very good mix of community members and a mix of groups and interests across the town. So I would like to propose to the town board that we appoint all 14 members who have applied as our Envision 2030 steering committee. I'm gonna open this up first to town board members, see if anyone else has comments or thoughts, and the public and applicants. So town board members, Tanya, you have any comments, or questions?
I agree with you.
Wonderful. How about Lindsay?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea to include everybody, and I look forward to meeting them all in person someday, and looking forward to hear what they have to say in this meeting as well. Mayor
Pro Tem Baumhover.
I love it. I was sitting here going, we have to pick 6? That doesn't work. So yeah, full agreement.
All right, Julian.
Looking over the resumes, I was quite impressed. I would say no problem at all. I'm with you all the way, Mayor.
All right, Eric.
Thank you, folks, for stepping up. Really appreciate it, and it's going to be exciting.
Last but not least, Alan.
I think that's a great idea. We have some extremely qualified people, and it'll be great to have them all on the planning commission, whatever we call
it. Yeah, I was steering committee as well as calling it. I'm not sure if that's appropriate with 14, but we'll come up with a good name.
Yes.
Actually, one other thing I did forget I was going to bring up on this is something that Miranda touched on. We do have members of advisory board, BZA, DDA, Planning Commission, and if SAB and ProSAB would like to identify representatives to join this, I would absolutely agree and appreciate that as well. But as I was thinking about it and looking at this, I realized there's one board that's kind of missing, and that's the BOT. We're not, I think I would very much like us to have, to hear what is going on, because not only I think do we have some input and some views that might be of use, but I know that from previous times sitting in the Zoom meetings, or let's call them meetings, let's not jump straight to Zoom. We're going to all get vaccinated soon and be able to do this in person. These meetings, we hear the conversations, and I think there's a lot of benefit in hearing the conversations that go on instead of simply seeing the executive summaries and white papers that come out of it. So I was actually going to not put this on any member of the Board of Trustees. Don't worry, I see Eric's in his camera looking over like he's afraid he's going to get nominated, but I was actually going to step in myself and offer to join this as well. Because I've been involved in a lot of things in town, most of the boards, and I would like to serve on this as well, but as a co-equal member, not as a chairman or anything like that, just as a equal member to all the other members of the steering committee. So I wanted to throw that out there. And then I want to also just open this up to the floor, and anyone who would like to speak, I would open this up to the 14 members who have applied. If you'd like to speak for a minute or two and explain why, that would be awesome. Anyone else who would like to speak, we're going to kind of open it up. now would be your chance. So please catch my eye, raise your hand, or start speaking, and we will identify you.
Chris, this is Atashna. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Atashna. You are first to speak.
Okay, I would like to.
Sorry, just for the record, since we're recording, just say your name and whether or not you live in town. It's typical procedure. Thanks.
Okay, my name is Atashna Medicine Shield Werner. I am a 40-year resident, and you could read my brief bio on my application. I would like to thank the board for not closing the Envision process to townspeople only. I've been a participant in all the Envisions since day one. And historically, Nederland has been the hub community for all mountain people. And I know when I was a business owner in Nederland many years ago, and I don't know how much it's changed, but the majority of business owners are not town residents. And quite a few of the people who function, their lives function in one way or another in the town and support the town are not town residents. So I welcome the opportunity to participate in another Envision, since the majority of the advisory boards are closed to town residents only. So this is a wonderful opportunity to continue the inclusion, and I just want to thank you all for that.
And thank you, Tasha, for staying involved for all these years. Anyone else like to speak?
I have a question. This is my name is Jill Dreves. I live at 697 West Pine in Nederland, Colorado. And I'm very excited to be on the Envision 2030 committee. I have been a resident for 29 years in Nederland, and mostly in the focus of education and children and nature. So I do have a question. I wanted to know what the structure of the committee is in terms of leadership, agenda making, facilitation, productivity, especially when we have 14 people on the committee.
So Jill, so myself and Karen will serve as the facilitators for the meeting. The plan is to do a lot of the work in breakout committees. So originally, when we had started Envision back in 2020, we had made 6 kind of categories in which we were going to do breakout sessions. And so the goal is to split this group up into smaller groups of 2 to 3, and a lot of the work will be happening in subcommittees. The agendas will also be set ahead of time. So what will happen tonight is I will send out some documents. Our goal is to have our first meeting next week. And then when we meet, we'll have the full 6 months really mapped out on how we're going to move forward. So kind of more to come on that.
Great. That's very helpful. Thanks.
And I see a hand raised from Majorel. If you unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah. Well, good comments all around. I want to thank you for inviting us all to join in this intriguing process. So I look forward to working with everyone and establishing our procedures and criteria and our vision for the future. So thanks again, y'all, and look forward to it.
Thank you. Ari, I see your hand came up.
Hi, my name's Ari Goodman. Nice to meet you all, or see you again. I am a independent living advisor specifically for the Peak to Peak area for the Center for People with Disabilities up here. It's a pretty new job for myself. I've been living in the town of Nederland for about 3 years and absolutely adore it. I had the passion and opportunity to join this wonderful committee due to the fact that I am extremely passionate about accessibility and being ADA approved, so the Americans Disability Act approved, within our trails, within our buildings, within our town, and making sure everybody feels included, whether that be mental, physical, intellectual, emotional disability, as well as just embracing change. I hope to bring a new, fresh perspective, being such a new member of this community for 3 years only. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really look forward to it, and I'm super excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Looking forward to working with you. Anyone else?
So I know Tom is unmuting. Tom, are you there? There's some weird background noise, Tom, when it's like just clicks when I think you're trying to talk. Tom was hoping to say something.
Tom can keep working on it. I think I just saw a hand wave from Amanda McDonald.
Hi. I just want to say I'm really excited about this, and what a tremendous group of people, and Netherlands is a very special place. And I think now is a good time to really start fresh, with good perspective from what we've done in the past. And I'm sorry, Amanda McDonald, I live in Boulder, but I definitely have been involved in the Netherlands community for, I think, quite a bit of time. So I just thank you for the opportunity. And I think this is going to be a really dynamic group of people. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Anyone else?
This is Sarah. Sarah
Hey,
Martin.
Sarah.
Of course, I have to go right in there, right behind Amanda. Hi, Amanda. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mayor Larson. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Karen. Thank you all so much. This is just a tremendous opportunity, I think, especially in these times. We are so lucky to live in and be a part of a community on the Front Range in Colorado, and I am so excited I read everyone's bio. I read all of the different things that everyone has done. What a brain trust. We are blessed, and I really look forward to whatever we're doing going forward. And I thank you all so much. I loved how dynamic this call has been. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else?
So I'm hoping to try to give Tom another chance.
Oh, I see a calling user started to speak.
I think that's Billy.
Yeah. Hey, it's
Billy.
Billy. What's happening? How are you guys? How's everyone doing? Yeah, I'm just appreciate the opportunity, and I've been in Ned just 4.5 years ago, but I lived across the mountains in Fraser Valley for about 22 years, and then Utah for 8 years. And when we came back, we landed east of the mountains this time, and we've loved it since we've been here. And my biggest motivation is I have a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old, and want to just help to be part of making this continue to be a great place for them into the future. So thanks a bunch. Looks like a great group of folks, and looking forward to it.
Hey, it's Sarah again. I'm just going to say really quick because I didn't say it earlier. I live at 198 East First Street in Nederland.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Billy.
Yes, thanks. I'm 196 South Tilden in Old Town.
So I wanted to see, Tom, are you there? I think we're still having. So Tom had just sent a message that he just wanted to say that he totally agrees with what Sarah was talking about in terms of the brain trust. Unfortunately, I don't think he can share much more.
We look forward to hearing from you, Tom, at all the future meetings of this new committee. I just want to speak. If not, and I'm not seeing or hearing anyone, we will bring look for a motion to appoint all 14 of these people to the Envision 2030 committee.
This is Trustee Taylor. I move to appoint all applicants to the 2030 committee.
Trustee Taylor, can you also add to your motion, adding in Mayor Larson since he is not listed here?
I move to approve all applicants to the 2030 Envision Committee, as well as Mayor Larson.
There we go. Do we have a second? I heard a second from Trustee Danforth. Miranda, please call the vote.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin.
Yes.
Wonderful.
All right. And again, thank you all for stepping up and being part of this community and serving. And like Miranda said, she'll be sending out an email with more details, and we'll look to kick this off next week. So again, thank you all.
so much.
My
Thank you.
second favorite inauguration of the week.
Hey, Carol.
All right. Then we are going to move on to the agenda to item 6.1, which is the draft of the Great Outdoors Colorado Resilient Communities Grant. And I believe we're going to hear from both Miranda and our ProSab Chair, Jesse, on this one.
Yes, I'm just going to give a little background and then I'm going to turn it over to Jesse. So as indicated in the AIM, you all know we originally applied for the grant in November 2020. We were informed that we did not get selected for the grant, and in the packet is kind of an explanation of why, but really GOCO felt like we did not effectively highlight how developing Barker Meadows Park would really help with the impacts of COVID. So when we met with their senior program officer, just to talk about whether or not we could reapply for the final round of funding, he said we were eligible and we could, but just strongly encouraged us to remove the Gershio irrigation and the upgrades to Chipeta Park, the bathrooms there, and asked that we just focus specifically on trail development. He felt like that would make for a stronger application. So we brought this back before ProSab. They agreed they wanted to reapply, and I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to give a highlight of what our new focus is on.
There. Hi. Yeah, so I'm going to just be presenting this grant application proposal real quick on behalf of ProSab tonight. I am Jessie, Chair of the Netherlands Parks Recreation Open Space Advisory Board. So tonight is, yeah, like you said, the second time this particular grant possibility is coming towards in front of the board. I could even give you the exact wording that the reviewer comments were: we would appreciate better justification that this is indeed a priority for Nederland, especially the turf field development. Is this really the most appropriate need to address emergent pandemic-related issues if team sports cannot continue through potential future shutdowns? So in response to kind of some of the reviewers' comments, we removed anything that wasn't directly related to project requirements, and we took out anything that wasn't considered critical needs in regards to stewardship and in relation to pandemic stresses. So yeah, as you know, it is a funding opportunity through Great Outdoors Colorado, and it's called the Resilient Communities Program. And it's important just to note that this is different to previous GOCO funding cycles. So this is a one-time funding for immediate needs that have emerged in direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we decided this time around that we're not going to frame this or discuss this as a park development project. We're just going to really talk about this in terms of rehabilitation, restoration, to address critical trail and natural resource stewardship needs. And there's a draft in the AIM there of the 100-word summary, which, in case you haven't read it, I feel like I should read that real quick to you. It goes, the 100-word summary seems to be fairly important in terms of the reviewers' feedback. So the title of this project grant application, we've called it so far Netherlands Shoreline Trails and Stewardship Project. This project will create trails and improve access to the Barker Reservoir shoreline area while rehabilitating the area's natural features. As a Front Range community, usage dramatically increased throughout the pandemic, leading to erratic social trails, erosion, and water quality concerns. Trail improvements are vital as there is only one narrow trail in the overused area. Site design includes doggy waste receptacles, revegetation, native seeding, and stewardship education. And natural play sculpture will be built by youth crews employed through nonprofit partner Teens Inc. So the team's works will also address the trail damage caused by the sudden increase in foot damage. And then just to kind of speak to, now, I believe we have a very highly compelling case for Netherlands. Like the need is most certainly there. It's going to be incredibly competitive to put this into consideration here. You can understand that 27 out of the 48 grants last cycle were not awarded. So those 27 and maybe more are likely going to be applying for this next round in funding. And this next round, they're going to be applying for maybe around 17 million or over in funding. And there is 1,266,000 left in funding. So my guess is there is going to be around 5 out of 30 grant applications funded this cycle. So it is highly competitive. And you'll see from the budget, we've reduced the amount that we've requested from 357,499,000 to 202,000. And I think I and myself and the rest of ProSub would be interested in trying to maybe get that requested funding amount below 200,000. So that would be just a matter of trying to whittle off a couple of grand there, just to really make it more of a compelling case. I think just number values, if they see that's below 200,000. So any tweaks that we do beyond this, we have a ProSab meeting coming up this Thursday evening. We will be discussing just tiny little tweaks, details like that, and then you'll get a good feel for the rest of it. We've done the same amount of outreach. We have community and public outreach. From last time, we've just taken away some items. So we have removed aspects from last funding, for example, irrigation and like anything to do with turf and topsoil for field. So it really is a stripped down kind of version of the. So we'll be discussing that at our upcoming meeting on Thursday, and I will be happy to address any questions that you might have for us.
This is Trustee Taylor. I have a quick question. I understand that you're kind of working in the dark with these sorts of things. We have to hope we're providing something that will be appealing to the reviewer. I'm curious why removing the touch-free restroom work came out. That seems like such a natural COVID-19 operation. And I'm not questioning your decision to pull those out, but I am curious as to what your thoughts were on that removal.
So Trustee
that was based on feedback from town. I'm sure Miranda will be happy to speak to that, but it turns out that the funding for those things will be able to come from elsewhere instead of the parks grant. So
okay, that's fine.
I'll let town staff can talk to that.
It was recommended to by GoCo that we remove that, and then we just become a little bit more singular focused. But to that point, in talking with Nikki Down, who's the parks lead, she had noted that the bathrooms at Chipeta didn't need nearly the level of work like the visitor center bathrooms that we're working on now. And so it may be possible to use some remaining CARES funding to do just kind of the minor upgrades that might be needed for Chipeta.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you, Miranda. That's good.
Very good. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Julian, for the kicking off the questions. Other trustees have questions or comments regarding the grant? Just going to call in random order, starting with Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
No particular questions. I'm curious, the last round of this grant had some funds in there for potentially staffing an additional Parks and Rec or Parks and Open Space staff member. Is that one of the items being pulled out of this grant?
It is, and in reviewing that with Nikki, just felt like, because we're trying to keep it under 200,000, also a request of GoCo that we had to start kind of being mindful of what things that we would pull, and felt like the staff was maybe an appropriate removal, since the level of the project is not nearly as intense as it was the first round. The secondary staff would have been really helpful had we had Gershio and irrigation and everything that was going to go into that. But since we were removing that, the need for the staff was not the same.
Okay, are we concerned about the ability to maintain this park? I know ProSab is in discussions looking at Nederland recreationary assets, and it's been an ongoing problem for the last 5, 6, 7 years that we have a lot of assets, but not necessarily any staffing. And while they're normally run by nonprofits who do an exceptional job of maintaining programming, when those nonprofits kind of peter out or fall apart, it seems to fall on town staff to maintain these assets. And it's not necessarily budgeted for, nor do we have a source of budget for that. So I'm just a little concerned. I understand updating the trails is one thing, but do we necessarily want to go about updating all these trails, making them ADA, if we know that we cannot maintain them?
I mean, I think speak a little bit to that, Jonathan. I mean, you know a lot of the background to this. So this particular planet just really focuses on long-term maintenance as a really major factor for Nederland to consider. So everything in this plan is hyper low maintenance. There's no grasses. It is just hardy, drought-tolerant native species and sustainable materials. And then we've gone with the most we've gone with the anti-vandal picnic benches and super simple stone benches. So there's no work involved for the Public Works Department on that side of things. And then this round also, we've actually requested a trail grader as part of the equipment necessary and needed. So a trail grader would massively reduce labor time on our public works, not only on this area, but throughout the whole town, which would be actually cut down on a lot of labor time, and it would definitely ensure safe parks access year round.
Sweet. Thank you. I think that's just about all my questions. I'm glad to see you guys going for round 2. Thanks for all the awesome work.
Trustee Coombs Ismail, any questions or comments?
Just that itself, I think I don't think it was as weak as sort of our rejection makes it sound. There were the only towns that actually received, if you look through the funding proposals that were actually awarded, the only towns that actually received funding were towns who had opportunities to make acquisitions, which GOCO actually explains in the letter that they attached, saying that they actually admittedly erred more towards these sort of opportunistic acquisitions rather than directly addressing COVID needs as the grant stipulates, and that they also erred towards more urban areas rather than more rural areas. And so, a lot of the cards were stacked against us from the previous application. And I do think we were encouraged maybe a little bit more than we should have been by GOCO in that last round. And at this time, I think we have a better chance, but I don't think that Nederland and our COVID concerns are really GOCO's main priority in any circumstance here. And so if we do get it, it will be due, purely down to town staff and, Jesse's persistence in making sure that they recognize our needs as legitimate, and that COVID-19 has hit us quite hard in this small town that does have a lower median income than a lot of the places that they did award funding to. So I think a lot of this is because we're not, quite as attractive a proposition as maybe some places, and that is frustrating. But I really applaud the work done to resubmit this grant and re-put something together that hopefully puts pressure on them to give us the award that I think we really do deserve.
Agreed. All right. Alan, Trustee Abt?
I'm very impressed with the application. I think obviously a lot of work and thought have gone into it, and it's very well thought out. And I think the fact that you mentioned that we are sort of a regional hub for recreation. People come to town, at least they certainly have been this COVID era, but I don't think that's going to go away. So I think what I've noticed is that that reservoir area has a great deal of potential and not much in the way of resources, and that park has a great deal of potential as well. I guess one question I have is, one of the deterrents has been we've had big trucks having to pull onto that field to access town facilities. Is that not going to be the case anymore? I guess that's a question for Chris.
Hi, Alan. Are you talking about Gercio Field?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been able to eliminate that need through the construction of the biosolids project, and we've created quite a bit of space within the area of the wastewater treatment facility. And so it's not needed to use that space for turning around. And actually, if you've been there lately, we've put up a lot of rocks to keep vehicles off the field since then. So, to your question, no, we don't have to put any cars on there.
Okay, great. One question I have for Jess is, I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, a whole lot of mention about performance space. Is that because GoCo doesn't care about that kind of thing, or we just figure we have that?
Yeah, I mean, primarily just because GoCo will not fund amphitheaters or performance space.
Kind of what I
So
thought.
everything in this plan is kind of just left. It's just a natural, sustainable kind of meadow, restoring it to its original state. But it does leave it open for any possibility in the future. So for further phases, if anyone was interested in pursuing things like that, there's nothing here that would prevent that future development from happening.
Okay, great. Well, anyway, thanks for all the work, and full speed ahead.
That's first.
Thank you, Alan. Trustee Corvallin.
I don't have too many questions. I hope.
Agreed. And Trustee Danforth.
I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm glad that we have the chance to reapply for it. And best of luck to everyone.
Agreed. This is an action item, so we're going to throw it open to the floor. If anyone from the public would like to speak to a grant application that we're looking at moving forward on, now would be your opportunity. Again, raise your hand, wave at us, somehow catch our attention. I see Atashna raising her hand first. Atashna will get the floor first. And as usual, just name and whether or not you live within Nederland city limits.
Atashna Medicine Shield Werner. I live outside the town limits. I want to address something that Jonathan brought up about the sustainability of the recreational assets owned by nonprofits that just kind of ebb and flow, and the financial stress that it puts on the financial and the people stress that it puts on the maintenance and the repair. That is one of, at our next meeting, ProSab has some priorities, and we're going to be revisiting those priorities for this year. And one of those priorities is looking at the sustainability of our recreational assets and how to maintain them for the future as things change. So that is one of the priorities. as far as the GoCo grant, if I'm not mistaken, a majority of those who had applied and were funded, the emphasis was on trails, anything and everything that had to do with trails, getting people out into nature while hopefully socially distancing and adhering to other protocols. Whereas, which is why we had to do a radical, I think, sort of a radical turnaround and focus on the grant to eliminate pretty much anything that doesn't have to do with non-gathering, getting people out into nature kinds of things. I think we've done a fantastic job with that, although it has been extremely difficult because those of us who live up here were so nature focused, and the ball field in particular has been a focus for so many years for activities. However, the grantors just saw it as, well, this is not the time for having large social gatherings. So it's more, in my opinion, they're more focused on anything that has to do with trails. And I want to thank Public Works, Nikki and Chris, because they stood beside us and with every line item, really helping us to make the hard decisions, and also stepped in with offers to back up ProSab with its ability to really help develop Barker Meadow and the trails. So it was a whole town effort, and we all work well together. And so I just want to do that shout out as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tashna. Looking for anyone else who would like to speak. May, Gerald, I see your hand is up. I don't know if that's still up from the last time. I'm not sure it's gone down. Anyone else? Not hearing or seeing any. We'll bring it back to the board. Any final comments from the board or motion regarding ProSab applying for the GoCo Resilient Communities Grant?
This is Trustee Taylor. I move that we approve the GoCo, the application for the GoCo Resilient Communities Grant.
Alan, this is a second.
Trustee Danforth, and I'll.
Oops, sorry.
I think Alan slipped in there with the second.
We seconded the hell out of that.
Because we're excited about this grant opportunity. All right, Miranda, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Corbelin,
Yes.
Mayor Larson.
Yes. Motion passes. Best of luck to ProSab. Best of luck on the GoCo grant, and massive thanks to all the members of ProSab, Jesse, Atashna, you guys for all the work you've done, and like Atashna was saying, Public Works and town staff for having support for this effort. Fingers crossed, we can't wait to hear the outcome.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to move on to discussion item for tonight, which is looking at some code changes to encroachments on town right-of-way in the commercial parking fund. Sort of circling back on some things from late last year, and I believe one is going to be introduced to us by our town attorney, who's been waiting in the wings, Jennifer Madsen. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees. I'm here before you tonight on the consideration of two potential ordinance changes. The first is to adopt a process to require encroachment licenses for the occupation of town property. As you all may probably know, throughout the town there exist areas where private property owners are using or occupying town property or town right-of-way. The use of the property without any formal approval is without the formal approval or the town's permission. And therefore, under the law, these encroachments would be considered a trespass. The town has addressed some of these encroachments on a case-by-case basis, kind of in a piecemeal manner when an applicant brings forward a land use application. And in these cases, as part of the approval, the Board of Trustees has required the applicant to agree to an encroachment license agreement. The reasons for an encroachment license agreement are to document or memorialize the relationship between the private property owner and the town. The town allows the encroachment in exchange for certain promises by the property owner. Other municipalities have implemented a process to address these encroachments in more of a methodical manner rather than only through the applications that are submitted. And these other municipalities, they've adopted ordinances that require the property owners to submit an application for encroachments. Then through the application process, the property owner agrees to the encroachment agreement. That encroachment agreement typically allows for the encroachment. It cannot be expanded. There is generally specified the manner of termination, what the property owner's responsibilities are related to the encroachment, that the property owner must maintain whatever property or physical structure is encroaching on the town's property, and that the town is not responsible for any repair. So because I'm here before you on two separate matters, I thought I'd stop in terms of the encroachment piece of it and ask if you have any questions about that recommendation.
Jennifer, this is Trustee Taylor. I'm recalling the case of the veterinarian who was seeking to purchase the realty office near the town hall and the issues with the ways we were going to permit that veterinarian's use of town property and how that seemed egregious to the veterinarian. Do you think that this would make such transactions simpler? I mean, I read through the proposals and they look reasonable. Are you thinking that that would make that kind of a transaction more amenable to the purchaser?
I think potentially that would be one of the benefits of moving forward with this type of ordinance, is that what would happen is town staff would work on a more methodical approach to getting these encroachment agreements in place, and to have them in place before there's a land use application. In that situation, I can only speculate, but had there been an encroachment agreement in place before the special review use application came before the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees, perhaps there wouldn't have been an issue or a withdrawal of the application. I don't know, but the goal is really to document the relationship between the parties and specify that the town allows this encroachment and what the property owner agrees to in exchange for being on town's property.
I think that one of the ongoing issues we have seen is that our town code is in certain places a little vague, and eliminating that vagueness, I think, is generally a good idea. And it looks to me like this would make a purchase of that sort a little easier all around. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. Other trustees, we're looking at just that encroachment question. Do you have questions, clarifications that we'd like from our town attorney? Just going to open up the floor here to any trustee who wants to speak.
Is this just regarding commercial properties, or is this residential as well?
That would be open to your decision as the Board of Trustees. The idea would be is that if you as a group were interested in moving forward with this type of ordinance, what I would do is put together a draft ordinance and then come back for another discussion session, and we can address points like that. What the application of the ordinance would be, an application fee for an encroachment, other items as well.
Yeah, I like the idea personally of creating protections for both the property owner and the town, and kind of memorializing those protections, and making sure that an agreement is in place. That seems very logical to me, and that seems beneficial to both parties. The part that does concern me ever so slightly is the idea of trying to charge application fees, especially for people who have historically, already been kind of doing this, and we have this kind of tacit agreement to then turn around and start charging them fees to apply to this. Seems like that might be a bit onerous, and I would not be in favor of doing that. And hopefully the application can be very, very simple and not bureaucratically onerous either on these property owners. That would, or on our staff in terms of pouring through that application. So those are my only concerns, but I think the idea of doing this makes a lot of sense.
Anything else on encroachment?
When you guys rewrite this code, will it be pretty clear then what the encroachment, what's the word I'm looking for, consequences would be for a landowner? So if I were to buy a building with these encroachment flags all over them, it would be pretty clear then the penalties associated with that.
Right, and we could make the ordinance as detailed as you wanted, without any significant detail. An encroachment would be not only a trespass, but would be a violation of the municipal code, which could then be a charge in the municipal court. But if to specify and flesh out some more detail as to penalties, we could definitely do that. I will say that, an encroachment, if you think about it, is just like your neighbor building a fence on your property. So, it really does benefit the property owner to get this license agreement in place, because the license agreement then allows for that property owner to have to encroach on the town's property without worry that maybe a future Board of Trustees would come say, oh, hey, we need you to move your structure off of town property.
Yeah, just so many of these buildings were, here. The whole thing's confusing to me, because why were these buildings built on town's lines? Why were the lines resurveyed to show these, later? And why couldn't the town just forgive everybody and redraw so that there are no encroachments? These like few feet here, a few feet there. It seems ridiculous to me, but I do think you guys should go ahead and rewrite the code to make everything super clear, so there's no questions regarding it. So yeah, I do think you should go forward with what you're doing, but I've always wondered why you guys don't just forgive it and just give that land to the buildings and just charge that property tax increase or something. I mean, I don't know what the benefit is for a town to keep it. It's not like you could ever do anything with the few feet here and the few feet there, or not like you're ever going to ask somebody to tear down a building, or I mean, or would you, you know?
Right. I think that would be, it certainly would be an option, but that would be a very serious question for the Board of Trustees to consider. And there would be other ramifications likely with a decision to tear down a building.
Right. What
but-
about a decision to just go through towns, surveyed properties, and just kind of like redraw the map a little so that there are no encroachments?
That's something that could be done. I don't know. It would definitely take money to go through that process, and the town would be giving up property then to other private property owners. And I can't say in every situation that it would be no big deal for the town to give up that property.
Gotcha. It's more than a few feet in some situations.
Likely, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have some questions or comments on encroachment?
Question, do we have any idea how many properties in Nederland approximately would be affected by this?
I think that's a better question for Miranda, because I think she spent some time taking a look at this particular issue.
And to that point, I don't know if I have the answer yet for you, Trustee Apt. I mean, we have significant concerns in Central Business District, but Cynthia and I are both working on pulling all the properties, starting with commercial, that do fall into this, and I can follow up. I don't have that answer right now.
Okay. Well, I think, I don't know the scope of it. I do think it's something that makes a lot of sense to have some procedures in place and some policies. And I think in the process of doing this, we'll want to have a pretty good idea who's being affected, so we can reach out to those property owners and get their input as we're considering this ordinance, because we don't want to get into a situation where we're moving right along and at the very last minute, a bunch of people find out about it and get really alarmed, and we have a major rebellion. I think we want to make sure we have the public well informed throughout the process. But good idea. Thank you.
Are you ready for me to move on to the commercial parking?
I think we might be. I think that was just about everyone speaking on encroachment.
Okay. Do you want to separate these in terms of getting agreement to move forward? It sounds like from the feedback, there is agreement to move forward with a draft ordinance.
Yeah, let's do like a not a 4 here from the board, now that we're all sort of have encroachment on our minds. So this is just looking to direct staff to draft these ordinances and move forward and bring it as an action item at a future meeting. So I'm just going to go down the list and get nods from Trustee Apt.
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Trustee Trustee Danforth.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin.
Yes.
And yes, myself. So that's nod of 7 to move forward on encroachment ordinance.
Okay. And what I would suggest too is that I bring it back as a discussion item.
Yeah, I don't think there's any massive pressure to do this immediately. So I think we do multiple discussion items, and I think it was, I've already forgot who it was. I might be Trustee Apt who mentioned outreach into the downtown business community and all that as we move along.
Okay. Well, the second item then is the commercial parking fund. And this has come up maybe a few times in the last year or two. But the commercial parking fund was adopted by an ordinance in 2008. And what the commercial parking fund is it's a payment of $2,500 to a commercial parking fund in lieu of the property owner providing the minimum off-street spaces required under the zoning code. So the owner of a use agrees to contribute to this fund by making that payment for each off-street space not provided by the property owner. And essentially what the owner of the use is agreeing to is to the 2,500 mitigates for the impact to not providing for that off-street parking. So there will be more cars parking on town right-of-way when the off-street parking space is not provided. There is no limit to the number of off-street spaces that can be purchased through this commercial parking fund. And there's not much other specificity in terms of that this payment to the commercial parking fund is really an exception rather than a permitted allowance in every case. The owner of the use doesn't have to make a showing that providing the minimum number of spaces is difficult or anything in that nature. It simply seems that there can be a request to make the payment to the commercial parking fund, and the town has to allow that payment. So then in another section of the code, and I'll just go over this quickly, there is a commercial parking fund that's established. Payments that are made to that fund go to a separate account, and that separate account then can only be used for certain expenses such as land acquisition, planning, design, street construction, street improvements, installation of curb, gutters, and pavement. So in the use of this commercial parking fund, a couple of things have come up as far as questions, and that is whether the Board of Trustees is interested in further defining the availability of this commercial parking fund. For example, one way to do that would be to limit the number of spaces that a property owner could take advantage of for that commercial parking fund, either the number or percentage, to further specify that payment is an exception if there are no parking opportunities elsewhere. And then another thing is this ordinance was adopted in 2008, and it was based on a study of the cost to purchase land adjacent to the central business district and develop it for purposes of a surface parking lot. There's no escalator in town code for that $2,500 commercial parking fund space. That's another consideration for further defining the use of this option of the payment in lieu of providing minimum off-street parking. So those are some of the issues associated with commercial parking fund. I don't know if Miranda wants to provide any specific factual details related to this, but this is something else that we wanted to bring to you for consideration.
And I can just offer a clarification that at this time, we've had one developer pay into the commercial parking fund for 2 spots off of Snyder. There's been discussion with other developers, one of which being Mandala Integrative Veterinary Services. That was an option for her with the real estate building. So we're in continuous communications with people, but at this time, only one developer has paid into this.
There's a lot of pieces and movement here on this one. You asked a lot of different questions. And I know this one's been kicked around, and various boards have kind of kicked this one down the road at various points. Has this been addressed at any time in the recent past by say the Planning Commission?
It has not been addressed by the Planning Commission. Yeah.
'Cause I see certain things in here, certain questions such as the number of spaces a property owner might pay for into the choose to pay for. This idea of an escalator based on property values and increased use of town right away in exchange. Those are some Planning Commission type questions, which, my view on this is tackling a big chunk, and I would like to send it to the Planning Commission to do some research. That would be my view. But I'd like to hear from the rest of the board as well. So there's, I guess we have 5 questions here regarding that Jennifer's brought up. So I'm just going to go through, and you can speak to any of the 5, all 5, or other concerns you've had or thoughts you have regarding the parking fund. And I'll go in reverse order this time, beginning with Trustee Corvalin.
Okay. Well, I do think sending it to the Planning Commission is not a bad idea for them to get their opinions on it. I think this is definitely needs to be redone. It seems like it's been very inconsistently enforced. If only one business is actually put in on the parking fund. And I mean, to me, the whole idea of a parking fund is kind of ridiculous. It's not like just because you pay, all of a sudden that parking spot's going to appear out of nowhere. It's not. So I do agree that we need to be stricter and have new businesses do everything they can to create parking and not just think they can just pay $1,000 or whatever it is, $1,500 and get out of it. But I also think it's a little odd that so many new businesses have been built or created, and some of them severely lacking parking, and only one business has paid into it. Who is that one business?
So it's 10 Snyder. So it's the housing that's being built on the yellow building off of Snyder. Just to clarify, so a lot of businesses do have parking agreements. So if you're able to locate spaces within 300 feet of your business, you can use that. So for example, some businesses have like contracts with the bank to use their space as their parking. Right. So that might be why people have not paid into this.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think a lot of that parking at the bank, though, for instance, should have been forced to create signage instructing people to park there. I've never hardly seen anyone actually use that parking at the bank. Or even know about it. And so, yeah, I'm all for you guys hashing this out. I want to see equity in the enforcement of it. And that's about it. I think parking is a pretty serious problem in Ned for the businesses. So anything we can do to create more parking would be good. If there is a parking fund, then I guess the next question would be, what do we spend? How do we use that money to actually create parking? I guess some of that money could go to projects like Chris Peltier is working on, or some of those other DDA projects could be donated to that. But that's a whole nother conversation. But that's it.
Thanks, Tanya. Trustee Danforth.
Yeah, I think this is really important to take a look at. And I do agree that the Planning Commission should probably weigh in on this as well. I have some opinions and some ideas, I think, in regards to how to get parking spaces and maybe what to use the fund for. But I certainly want to see it first go through the Planning Commission and see them hash it out before then we spend time doing that as well.
Thank you, Lindsay. Trustee Taylor.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty knobby problem. I mean, the problem we have basically is we don't have enough land, and we would like to invite in businesses, and so, yeah, not sure what to do. It does seem odd to charge a fee if that fee for parking, if that fee doesn't turn into parking in some way. So that may call for a really innovative way of making use of the money. And so I agree with the mayor that this is really a Planning Commission issue, and it would be nice to see some innovative proposals from the Planning Commission. And I would kind of like to see this money that goes into the parking fund directed kind of toward additional parking. And right now that looks just nearly impossible. And if additional parking is impossible, then I think we may want to think through why we're charging the $2,500 in the first place. But if additional parking through innovative use of some additional funds could be acquired, I think that's a great idea. And so it would be very nice to just see this sort of reoriented in that direction. I think it's an important thing to review. And yeah, I would like to see something go through the Planning Commission and see if they come up with something really interesting as a good use of a fee, or barring that, if there's no good use for the fee, I think I'm all for saying let's stop with the fee and come up with other ways of restricting new businesses. So that's all I'm thinking.
Thank you, Julian. Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer. Jonathan's still on mute.
There we go. I actually managed to click it this time. Kind of have some issues with this one. It looks like we're discussing the number of spaces that a property owner could pay for, in the commercial parking fund. As been noted, even if these property owners pay, doesn't actually mean that there's any more parking available in town. Number two would be to add language that the payment to the commercial parking fund is an exception if there are no parking opportunities. As Miranda kind of described, if these businesses can negotiate with other businesses and get into contracts, I guess what I'm seeing here is this kind of seems like taking money from businesses to not meet code while not actually addressing the root of the problem that created the ordinance in the first place. Most of the overflow parking on First Street for those businesses goes into Ron Mitchell's lots. And he has been before this board and previous boards many, many times trying to address ways that he can recoup the cost he bears, essentially, to provide parking for businesses that are not his own. This seems like town kind of taking a little bit of that pot while not actually providing anything. We don't necessarily have right of way to provide as parking area. So the use of town right of way in exchange for payment by property owners when that town right of way aren't actually developed parking spots just kind of screams wrong to me. And that's where I'm falling on this. I also don't see 2,500, even if you got 15 businesses to pay for 15 spots, maybe you're going to have $30,000. Looking at the budget of the project we discussed earlier on the visitor center lot, this is nothing. So I'm actually would love to see this kicked toward Planning Commission for ideas, but I'm leaning toward maybe just getting rid of this commercial parking fund because it doesn't serve its purpose, and it seems to just allow a way to get out of parking requirements. And if we're allowing for a way to get out of parking requirements for businesses because our businesses can't meet that, maybe then we should actually just look at the parking requirements, as previous trustee Dallas Masters had brought up many, many times, that our parking requirements for our businesses and also our residential properties are obscure and don't actually meet their intended goals. So I'm actually fairly against the idea of the commercial parking fund overall, but I would love to kick this to the Planning Commission and see what they have to say.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yeah, I have a few things, but I have a couple of questions first. And one question was currently, as it stands, the parking requirements are based on use. So if the use of the property changes, are we then asking people to provide more or less parking spaces? Is that currently how it operates?
Yes, that is how it operates. With the change of use, the owner of the use is required to then meet those parking requirements.
I see. So a property that's already been built and already developed then changes use and all of a sudden has more parking space requirements, which become, of course, impossible to fulfill because the property's already developed and it's already kind of set. Yeah, I can see how that's going to cause a lot of issues. And then the other question I had was, does this allow property owners to buy out ADA spaces?
So, no, the quick answer is no, because it doesn't really give the owner access to a town space. Essentially, what it is payment into the fund that is to be used for, I mean, in the big scheme, to be used for development of a parking lot. But it doesn't give access, say, you know, XYZ business pays money into the commercial parking fund, not in exchange for a town space that is labeled XYZ business. It doesn't work like that.
All right. Yeah, I kind of find myself coming down both agreeing with Trustee Taylor and Trustee Baumhover in that, you know, if we have this fund that can actually alleviate the parking problems that are created by the change of use for a business, then why have the fund at all? It doesn't really make any sense. Now, the one thing that I would say is if we are giving direction to bring this to the Planning Commission and we want the Planning Commission to come up with some creative solutions for potentially how such a fund might be used that maybe businesses would even be on board with, now that's, you know, that's a different prospect altogether, and that's something that I'm very interested in. And I would say that I wouldn't limit the scope of that to just parking necessarily. If there are creative ways to get traffic to businesses that we can invest in as a town using those funds that maybe don't involve car travel, I'm personally pretty interested in that as well. And so I don't think that the scope of this should be limited to just thinking about you know, vehicular transport necessarily, but just in general, making sure that businesses, that people have access to like town businesses and town facilities in any way, shape, or form. So I think that we can broaden the scope of that investigation, maybe to beyond parking to some extent, because I do believe we can kind of decide, you know, I hear what Trustee or Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer is saying about how obscure, you know, our parking even needs are, and what exactly it is that what our goals are. And I think to some extent, as a town, we can decide how many cars we want to park in our town, right? And we can say, this is it. This is how many cars we want to park here. And if anyone else wants to get here, they're going to have to find another method. And I think that that's actually perfectly acceptable if that's what we decide as a town, right? So this idea that like we constantly just need to be, you know, scraping and scrapping for, you know, a space here and there, I'm not sure is the best way to go about it. We might have a kind of a more holistic view of parking in town, and maybe this fund, you know, is sort of a piecemeal way of really addressing none of the problems that change of use in businesses create. So I think there's a lot to think about here. I don't think we can answer any of these questions that effectively at this stage.
Thank you, Eric. And Trustee Apt.
Well, I think my fellow trustees have come up with a lot of good issues and a lot of good ideas, and they don't necessarily all agree with each other. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I like the idea of trying to incentivize something other than car travel and maybe enhancing or encouraging people to use bicycles. It was interesting. I saw that there are grant opportunities for from the state to convince people or help people, I should say, to use e-bikes. And, you know, maybe we should, you know, collect that kind of a fund or use that kind of a fund to fund e-bikes for people so they can get around town without taking their cars and produce, you know, a lot less or zero pollution. So maybe that's a more creative solution. I do like the idea of going to the Planning Commission. Maybe the DDA should be involved too. But I do think we should be thinking creatively, not necessarily just about parking spaces. But Trustee Baumhofer did bring up the point that, you know, we have Ron Mitchell providing free parking. And if we're going to collect this fee and we want to take advantage of his ideas or the Presbyterian Church's ideas for providing parking, then maybe that's where we can direct some of these funds to those people who have provided some parking But I'm puzzled that most people don't want to use a Presbyterian church for one reason or another. And maybe that means it needs to be enhanced in some way. Certainly we can't pave these things, but maybe making it easier to get there or more attractive in either case is the approach. And we have this whole wayfaring thing going on right now. We're going to try to help people get around town. So anyway, those are some of my ideas, but I really got excited about the idea of e-bikes when I saw that. We have e-cars on the horizon. Why not have e-bikes and ways for the town to enhance it? Thank you. But something we want to investigate for sure.
So this is Julian. Could I step in just a moment?
Sure, go
I'm
ahead.
liking. I think we're all agreeing that we'd like the Planning Commission to take a look at this, and based on what everybody is saying, I think I kind of implied it, but I really like what everyone else said after I spoke. I think it would be nice to send this to the Planning Commission with the directive that we would like to consider non-parking alternatives that make additional parking less necessary. And I think there are probably a number of recommendations we could make based on just what the trustees have presented so far. And yeah, see what the Planning Commission comes up with that are along those lines and say, don't just think parking, think ways of eliminating the need for it. And that's a really cool approach.
Thank you, Julian. You stole my summary sentence I had written down on my pad of paper. But before we do get to the idea of kicking this or making recommendations for the Planning Commission or what we want to see happen, this is a discussion item, and I want to open it up to the community who is still logged in. If anyone would like to weigh in on the idea of parking in the town of Nederland, now would be a great chance. You can raise your hand, start waving, speak up, somehow catch our attention, and you can have up to 3 minutes to speak on this. And remember, if you're on the phone, *6 will unmute you. All right, I will bring it back to the board. Julian did a great job of kind of summarizing some of the thoughts I heard from the Board of Trustees along the idea of sending this to the Planning Commission to have them look at a sort of larger picture role of the parking fund in general. The questions that Jennifer put in the packet here with regards to if we keep up the opportunity for businesses to purchase out of their parking requirement, what would the questions that need to be answered, and then this idea of a holistic parking view, that's something that goes beyond cars, something that helps get them off the street, people move around, non-parking space related view of this. I think it'd be a great thing for us to pass to the Planning Commission for research, comment, thought, and recommendation. Is that I want to take this to town staff to see if that works for them. If this is answering some of the questions, Jennifer, that you brought before us this evening as an approach to moving forward. I didn't feel like there was an immediate need on this one, so it's something we can take a little time to research. But please,
No, I think the plan of sending this to the Planning Commission is appropriate. This is in Chapter 16, which is a zoning code, and so therefore, it would need to go to the Planning Commission at some point in time. So starting off there to brainstorm and further elaborate on solutions for this problem, I think is a great idea.
I just kind of want to jump in, and I guess I'm going to be like the not cool person, but I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that this is a parking issue, that someone builds an apartment building or a new shop and they're required to provide these 6 parking or 4 parking, whatever they are. We shouldn't, just because we want people to use alternative forms of transportation, we still need to find a way to address the parking issue. So I don't really like where everyone's going with this alternative transportation stuff. I mean, Netherlands really windy and icy about half the year. So like, I love the idea of riding a bike in the summer, and I ride bikes all the time. But when I need to run to the store to get one thing and it's 50-mile-an-hour winds and there's ice all over the streets, I'm going to take my car. And I don't think I'm the only one, and we need to have a place to park it. unless, you know, I like if we want to go alternative, I'd like the idea of town providing shuttle services throughout town as like a free little bus around town. But that's a whole nother conversation. I just think we need to be realistic. Like, as much as we all love to ride our bikes, are we going to provide fat bikes with studs on them for people to get to town? And, you know, late night when they go out to dinner and it gets dark at 4:30. I mean, that's all. I'm just kind of like bringing people down to reality a little bit, that this is ultimately a parking issue that I kind of want the planning commission to focus on that, solutions for parking. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. I think maybe I glossed over a little too much. One of the things I do want the planning commission to look at are the 5 questions that that Jennifer put into the packet that are on the screen. The idea of what, not necessarily saying people can get out of doing these parking or needing X spots, but what are the alternatives for it, and if the parking fund even makes sense. And so it's kind of we did go kind of down the alternate route, and we certainly, I think a lot of us love that idea, but we are not ignoring the fact that parking would be necessary for some of these businesses and letting them off that hook. It's more just trying to give a more equitable basis for it for businesses, and those are buying in or trying to buy spots and that kind of thing. But thanks for bringing it out, Tanya.
Mayor Larson, Ron Mitchell was going to make a public comment, but was having issues unmuting. So I don't know.
Okay.
Open that back up.
Yeah, please. Sorry, Ron. We'll give it another chance here for public comment. Ron, if you'd like to speak.
Well, I'm very interested. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please just identify yourself for the recording and the record.
Ron Mitchell, resident of Nederland. I just wanted to comment that I think this is a very, very important issue, and that it's very, very difficult for me, and I don't think I can continue to provide free parking and pay the taxes on the property without some help one way or another. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ron.
Mayor Larson, this is Karen Garrity. I just wanted you to know as well that for the previous conversation having to do with encroachment, we did get a public comment from Kathleen through email, but it came just after that conversation had ended is when I got it in my email.
Okay.
But would you like me to share it publicly?
Sure.
Because I don't recall. Okay, let me just get to it. So she said, Kathleen Chipai, 30-year MAG resident, 17-year business owner. Why did the town allow the smokehouse and the apothecary as new builds to build into the encroachment to the line on the south side of First Street? These properties have this problem, have had it for 40 to 50 years.
Okay. Thank you for the comment, Kathleen. Anyone else with public comment?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes. Identify yourself. Oh, there we go, Jesse.
Hey, yeah, just listening about parking. Sorry, I wasn't close enough to get back to the computer when you raised public comment there.
Just identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, Jesse Ansari. I am resident of Nederland in Big Springs. Think about parking a little bit. People come to Nederland in their cars. That this is how they by and large get to this town. So the idea to get people to stop here, they do need some place to put their cars, and whether that is in town or outside of town, someplace. I think Tanya's kind of just general concept of a town shuttle service would be something fantastic. I think that would be an amazing way to increase equitable access for seniors around town and for different, parents with children and something like that. So it's a great concept. I hope we can find a way to address this issue with Envision 2030, and maybe even think about ways that we can combine issues like fire mitigation to west of town, creating land space, creating parking spaces. And I love the idea of beyond cars, thinking about beyond cars and how we can increase alternative modes of transportation around town, and hopefully Nederland can be a leader in this way of thinking. But it is a reality that people come here in their cars, and we use our cars and we need them. It's not easy to get around in different seasons in Netherlands. So yeah, a world that doesn't need parking would be great. But yeah, I would definitely be interested in exploring Tanya's and Eric's and everyone's ideas about alternative, and your ideas about alternative transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Anyone else? We'll bring this back to the board. Do you believe that we've given sufficient direction to the Planning Commission? Are there any outstanding questions that we should address before kicking it to them?
I think I have enough to bring it to the Planning Commission.
Okay. Trustees, any last comments on this before we move on? All right. Well, then we will send this to the Planning Commission and look forward to hearing back from them, some of their recommendations and what their creative solutions they've come up with. Meanwhile, we will move on with our meeting this evening and into our staff reports. And we will kick this off beginning with our town administrator, Charity.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know if I'll be able to keep my video up. I know it's very rude, but my bandwidth isn't that great. So Miranda will just cut me out my video. I've noticed that some other folks have as well. So I apologize in advance if you lose my face. So I started off, I do staff accolades every month. And for this month, I'm recognizing everyone. We've had an incredibly challenging year with the house explosion, the wildfires, and a pandemic. And some of the things that I'm grateful for the staff is the town staff's immediate and consistent response to the pandemic, which ensured the health, safety, and well-being of the community. Our town has the lowest infection rate in the county, and we're still holding steady at 20. Our department heads adopted a 2020 contingency budget immediately with substantial decreases in expenses, and that ended up in balancing out the losses in earned revenue, and it further strengthened the town's financial position in a time where many of our fellow municipalities are really struggling. But the fact that the department heads got on it right away and were consistent throughout the year meant that we were still able to have a very strong financial position. The Nederland Police Department's response to the house explosion, including safely securing the crime scene, working closely with outside agencies to mitigate the dangerous situation, and then leading the on-site investigation, which resulted in the arrest of the suspect. The incredible work done by the Recovery and Resiliency team to monitor the pandemic and the ever-changing public health orders, and consistently communicating with local businesses and residents so they could safely provide goods and services and hold special events. The remarkable productivity of all the departments, despite the reductions in staff and other resources. I mean, it's evident even tonight as we talked in the work session, and Chris Pelletier led that conversation about the TIP project, all these projects that have continued to happen, all the work coming out of the town clerk's office, the work coming out of the planning department, the community center, town hall. It's just been incredible and really very humbling to see what we've been able to do, even with a small staff and even with dwindling resources. And our town staff remained open and flexible during this tumultuous year, and that was essential as we collectively addressed the moving target of urgent needs due to the pandemic, the explosion, and the wildfires. Town staffs also had a timely response to the wildfires, including the immediate activation of the Nederland Community Center, which actually happened on that Sunday for the first fire, as an evacuation information facility, which proved to be a critical resource for the peak-to-peak region. And then, of course, the safe return home of the 5 staff members who had to evacuate due to the fires. And I also want to recognize the positive attitudes, the warm smiles, the funny stories, the kind words, the praise for a job well done, and all the other forms of emotional support shared by the staff during the difficult year. And that helped us all to get through this year, through 2020, while we were struggling. So the town staff has proven their collective resiliency in 2020 and will no doubt continue to build upon the strength in 2021. And as I said, it's a real honor to be a member of this team. As far as the COVID update goes, some of the information in the report is already out of date because things are happening so fast. But some good news. Currently, our 5-day rolling average daily case count is about 71 cases per day, and that's a decrease since last Tuesday when the average was 96 cases per day. Our current 2-week cumulative incidence is at the level orange on the dial, which we talked about before, and we're currently at 334.7 per 100,000 people in the population. And this threshold for the 2-week incident indicator is lower than it was last week, which was at 354. So we're kind of in that right between the two, orange and red, and we're hoping that we can actually get it down into orange and keep it there. Case rates have been decreasing across the whole metro area for about 7 to 14 days. Boulder is actually lower than all the other counties in terms of new case rate per 100,000. The long-term care facility cases are falling. There have been 62 long-term care facility cases in Boulder County residents in the past 2 weeks. We're beginning to see fewer cases among this high-risk population, especially over the past 2 weeks. There's currently 16 confirmed active outbreaks in Boulder County long-term care facilities. And of course, none of those are up here in Nederland. Hospitalizations decreased in Boulder and statewide since last week. Right now, 36 people are hospitalized in Boulder County with confirmed cases, and that's down from 51 last week. And it's true across the state as well. We're at 833 people hospitalized, and a week ago we were at 924. So that's a great downward trend that continues. Deaths among the Boulder County residents, the most recent one was on January 12th. To date, we've had 207 total deaths, which of course is 207 too many. December now has the highest number of deaths among residents with COVID, with an average of over 2 deaths per day. So far in January, 17 Boulder County residents with COVID have died. 82% of those have been associated with long-term care facilities. As far as vaccinations go, as of this morning, 16,794 Boulder County residents have received at least one COVID-19 vaccine dose, and 2,455 have received both doses. In Boulder County, almost 27% of the population over 70 years old has received at least one COVID vaccine, and that's the largest percentage of any age group in the county. Vaccination distribution in the state is increasing from approximately 60,000 doses per week. Now that's for the entire state, and that has increased for this week and next week and through the end of the month to about 80,000 per week. And then in February, the doses are projected to increase to 100,000 or more per week. The state is close to completing the first and second doses for frontline healthcare workers and employees and residents of long-term care facilities. They're just about complete with that phase. The state has a goal of vaccinating 70% of the people over 70 by the end of February. And of course, the reason why they've become such a priority is because this age group represents 78% of the deaths in the state. As far as testing and positivity, our current 14-day average tests per day is now at 2,185 in the county. Our current rolling average positivity rate is 4.5%, and that's been relatively steady for the past couple weeks. It's a big drop when it was much higher even a month ago. And of course, our goal in the county has been to be at 5% or below, so we're hitting that mark. As far as the 5-star certification program that we introduced last, I believe it was our last board meeting, tonight the Boulder County Commissioners are considering for approval a Boulder County application allowing us to participate in this program. If the Boulder County Commissioners approve the application, then it will be submitted later this week, and the county would likely hear back from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment within 5 business days. This is the program that allows qualified businesses to operate with less restrictions based on heightened safety protocols beyond what is required by the public health orders. And right now, what you should know is that as a county, we're still blipping into the red with one of our indicators. So even if we were allowed to shift into this program, we couldn't automatically start up the program. We'd have to wait until we have 2 weeks of having all of our numbers be at the orange level. As I also wanted to give you a real quick update on the Nederland Interagency Council on Homeless Encampment. And they did have an unusual year because of COVID. They only had interfaces or knew of 265 campers that were estimated to be in the area. And this is down quite a bit from 550 that we had last year. They were able to make contact with 136 individuals, and they connected 47 of them or 46 of them to various services, including healthcare, job support, emergency shelter, and whatnot. I did want to share with you that the coordinator, Claudia Schofler, has decided that she will not continue in the position next year. But the good news is that we had an amazing volunteer, Bridget Johnson, who went along with Claudia and participated very deeply in the program this summer. And she has already offered to take on the position, and she's working closely with the niche team to be able to get it up and running next year. And as far as next year, the biggest challenges that we're anticipating is re-engaging volunteers who either couldn't take part in the program because of COVID or didn't have as many people to help because of COVID. So it's just, re-engaging those volunteers and then re-engaging the organizational connections that have been built over the years, because we just didn't have all the meetings that we normally do and all the connections that we normally do because of COVID. And then as far as building and planning goes, you've got the reports attached to this staff report. And you'll see that even though there were some drops in how many inspections and permit applications we handled, it's actually very similar. So despite the pandemic, I just want to give a big shout out to the building and planning staff for advancing community development in a safe manner and figuring out a way to make it still possible to provide really excellent customer service and keep things humming. And then, as you are aware, the Planning Commission continues to review the Nederland Municipal Code and consider revisions to Chapter 17 and the subdivision regulations. And they're working closely with the staff and with the town attorney. And we'll keep you up to date on that as well. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Karen. Just a couple things, just a few things you've been handling.
Just the highlights.
Just the highlights, yes. Any questions for Karen? All right. I just want to add my thanks to your staff accolades to all of our staff. Just incredible last year and start of this year.
Just outstanding.
Yeah. Our town accountant, Rita.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees, and members of the public. Hopefully you can hear me. I've really had some connection issues tonight, so hopefully it'll work out. As you can see in my staff report, I do not have any financial statements to share with you this evening. Year end really, and first quarter is just a busy time for the finance department. I do plan on presenting the pre-audited financials for the year ended December 31, 2020 at the March 16th BOT meeting, as well as the January and February financials. I want to point out on the December financials, and we did talk about this back in December, we did issue an additional payroll dated December 31, which was savings in the personal budgets will cover that increase. As far as the 2021 budget update, I am busy working on the 2021 budget book, and that will be submitted to DOLA by the January 31st deadline, and shortly after it'll be uploaded to the town's website. The 2020 audit, town staff has begun working with the auditors, and hopefully, and the plan is to begin the audit early in the spring. Let's see, I did want to let you know we did receive November sales tax last week, and I'm happy to report that we are at 7.8% above what we were at in 2019. So that is just wonderful news. And that's it for me.
Thank you. That's
Any questions?
Any questions for the accountant? All right. Thank you very much, Rita. Next up, Deputy Town Administrator / Town Clerk Miranda.
So I gave just kind of a brief overview in my report of just kind of year to date. So business licenses in 2020, we issued 195 business licenses, and that's a combination of renewals and new. And over the last 30 days, I've done 22. I continue to work on the license renewal for the Caribou Room, and then from marijuana standpoint, working on the Flower Collective, Silverstem, and Harvest House. And I'm about to add into that mixture the Kind Castle. All 4 marijuana licenses end up being due around the same time. So busy time in marijuana licensing world. I'm going to add planning and zoning, just some updates there in addition to the graphs that Karen shares. But just for y'all to know, we did 113 permits in 2020, and within the last 30 days, we've issued 5 permits. Over the last 30 days, I've completed 5 core requests, which I have listed there. And then just a quick update on the CARES funding. If you all recall, at the end of 2020, we received $150,000 from the Boulder County Commissioners to assist businesses. And of that fund, we were able to support 42 businesses who had demonstrated a loss of revenue. And that's my quick report.
All right. Thank you, Miranda. Any questions for Miranda? All right. We will move on to Town Marshal's report. Larry Johns.
Thank you, Board and Mayor. Quick staffing update. We went through another round of testing, tested 3 guys. They all did well and scored well. One of them is actually from California. He's really excited to want to move to Colorado. He definitely wants out of California. The sooner the better on his end. So we'll see how that goes. He's taken some steps to get a provisional post certificate here in Colorado. Moved his California one over. So hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we might have 1, maybe 2 new officers if we're lucky. So we'll see how things go, see how backgrounds go on these guys, and keep pushing forward. Under the noteworthy items, I don't know if you guys have noticed, I'm sure you have, the amount of ski traffic on the weekends, and even in the weekdays, it's pretty busy in the afternoon. There's been an increase in our enforcement, and it really has no effect on the ski traffic. They're just flying out of town. if you guys have noticed, CDOT removed the larger signs leaving town. They were the size for an interstate. They were put up several years ago by CDOT, and I think they help. If you want to have a comparison, take a look over on 119 coming in from the south over by around Tilden. You'll see they still have some larger signs there that they didn't get to or they didn't know about or something. Anyway, they've switched those out, and I think it's kind of unfortunate. I'm going to lobby to try to get larger signs back up. I'm also working with them. I'm going to ask them to do a traffic study, and I'm presenting to them specific areas where I'd like to see our speed limits changed a little bit or modified, I guess I can say. Just move the speed limit signs around a little bit and start slowing the traffic down a little bit farther as they're coming into town, off of Ridge Road and in front of the Tungsten Village. So we'll see where that goes, and I'll keep you posted on that. Other stuff that's kind of going on countywide that's important. There's a ton of auto thefts and auto break-ins going on right now. A lot of police chases are going on. Practically, it sounds like 1 to 2 a day on the radio. Haven't heard any this week, but it's just kind of out of control. Boulder County DA's office is working on putting together a crime data presentation to show like what this increase is after the COVID outbreak, because all the agencies are seeing it. Not so much up here, of course, but Longmont, Lafayette, Boulder, I mean, everybody's seeing a pretty good uptick down the flats. Another thing that's going to work good for us, I believe, is this Boulder County had what they call the EDGE program, which was for a group of mental health workers that would come out when people were in crisis. They had it for about the last 5 years. We weren't funding it, so they weren't allowing their people to come here, except for the last year. And a couple of times we did use them, I was completely unimpressed, to be honest with you. They've dropped that program or dropped that contract, and now they've hired their own employees, and they're running their own program off of a grant that they got for 5 years. So I think it's a more invested program since they're actual employees of the county. Potentially, they may get another 2-year grant extended, which would be great. But I met with the administrator last week and another one of their lead mental health workers and was really impressed by them. They're really excited to get up here into the mountain community and work with Nederland, Ward, just everywhere around here and try to integrate. They do more than just coming out when people are in crisis. They will come out and work with people who are just kind of in need, and they have access to all the other health and human services departments, so they can kind of steer the people where they feel like they need them, and then they also have their own ability to help immediately. They can provide cell phones, they can provide some immediate needs for people just to get them by as needed to get past the crisis. It was pretty obvious to me that getting them hooked up with Pastor Hansen and Don Baumhofer would be really important, and I went ahead and got that accomplished. Don's really excited about it after reading about him. I'm not sure if she spoke with him yet or not, but she's pretty excited about it. So I think it's going to be a really good thing for the area, and we're seeing some really good stuff going on, in my opinion, with the Nederland area seniors, and they're getting out and doing more meal delivery than ever, and they're checking on people, and we're giving them referrals and stuff like that. So things are going good in that aspect, in my opinion. Lastly, I just want to touch on the Colorado Rangers approached me and asked me to sit on their board of directors. They had a vacancy. I was really thrilled and thankful that they offered me that position, and I went ahead and accepted that. I think it's going to be good for me and for the town. It'll give us some more exposure, get us to be able to network a little more with other agencies and stuff. So that's the meat of my report. There's a few other things in there. If you guys have any questions about or whatever, just holler.
Any questions from the board?
I did just have one quick question. Sorry. I was just wondering, Marshall, about the co-responders program, and you said that Nederland has access to that program through the county. Are there kind of prerequisites or limits to how many times you can call on them? Is it just a matter of calling? How exactly does that work?
The only prerequisite to it is that the law enforcement has to call them out. So if you come to me and say, hey, my neighbor's got this, and this going on, and I really think it should be checked on, you know, I can pop over there, have a conversation with that person, or just based upon what you're telling me, it's really obvious that they need something and they need probably more than I can do for them. I can make that call. So yeah, they're not on 24/7, but if it's a case where, you know, they're stable enough to make it through the next day or something, then we can get them, excuse me, the following day. There's a total of 4 of them. So, you know, there's going to be times it is a little bit thin. And they talked about expanding their hours. My suggestion to them was start later in the day, because right now they're starting around noon and go until 8. I suggested they go from 2 to 10, because that's when we're really seeing, you know, the need for people. So they're pretty wide open. The only caveat is law enforcement has to make that referral. That's it.
Cool. Thank you, Marshall. I'm interested to hear how you feel like that program goes.
You bet. I'll keep you guys posted once we start getting some referrals going and see how things are going. Of course, you know, I won't be reporting on any specific people, but maybe some specific instances. And I actually had a conversation with a gentleman today at the grocery store who I checked on several months ago for Nederland area seniors, and they bring in meals. At first, he didn't even want the meals, and they slowly kind of worked their way in there. And he's kind of his own little hermit of a guy, but he at least has some outside connection now. And you know, I just planted the seed today. I knew he was going to say no, thank you, but I at least planted the seed, and we'll get him over there to his house sooner or later and see how things go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Eric. Next up, Public Works. Chris.
Hello again. Okay, so last meeting rather, we discussed the intersection at Lakeview Drive, and I told you guys I'd reach out to CDOT to see if we're in some kind of queue for that funding that project. I've reached out to several reps, and I still don't have an answer, so I don't actually know if we're in any kind of queue. But I'm still working on it, so I'll update you guys when I know more. There's so many different pots of funds available that come up at different periods of time and meet certain criteria, and it's just sort of hard to follow. But I'll keep you posted. Let's see. I have been researching paving for well, particularly for the TIP project. To understand what those costs are going to be, but also for the roads that are deteriorating in town, such as Big Springs Drive and School Road, and the costs are daunting. They're pretty expensive. $1 million to pave Big Springs Drive is a hefty price tag, and so I'm trying to understand how to fund it, researching grant opportunities. Going to a seminar later this month to understand metro districts, tax districts. There's potential for maybe loans, but something will need to be done here in the near future, and so I'm trying to figure that out. Staff has seen the first draft of the master infrastructure plan, and the plan is mostly focused on utilities, and we've given our comments to JVA. We're hoping to have the first draft in front of you guys in your last meeting in February. Or rather, the final draft in the last meeting in February, so you guys can see where we're at. But primarily, the focus was utilities to help guide the rate study that we'll present to you the following meeting, and understanding future growth and infrastructure needs, and upgrades and so forth. So that's been a work in progress. Also, the town was awarded a grant recently. I think we let you guys know a couple weeks ago about the Safer Main Streets Initiative grant. I applied for it for a couple months ago and got approval from you guys to for a project worth $350,000. The town was awarded $280,000 for sidewalk upgrades and crosswalks upgrades, particularly at the library and at the visitor center. And so I'm working with town engineers to come up with a scope and start working on a design. And as that sort of comes to fruition, I'll bring it before you and other advisory boards for input. So that's it. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Public Works? All right. Community Center, Dawn.
Hello, how are you this evening? So I didn't have this in my report, but I want to follow up to what Larry said about the co-responder program. I was able to speak with Varus. He's one of the case managers and field managers for that program. And I reached out to the Peak to Peak Human Services, Housing and Human Services Task Force. And Varus will be joining our Zoom meeting tomorrow and sharing with that entire group what they do. It was an exciting conversation. The reason I'm so excited about it is it just fit. It seems like a hand in glove fit to the groundwork that the Housing and Human Services Committee has laid over the past number of years. It's the kind of program, it's grassroots, it's bottom up, it's serving people. It's not coming in and telling them what they need to do. So I love it that they're available to law enforcement to respond to some of these calls and take some of that burden off of our officers. So that's why I was so psyched about this program. Moving on to my community center report, I have included a graph here, and I just wanted to point out that we're not to the 24th of January yet. That graph point is based on our reservation system and our users that are utilizing that system. So that's what that's for. I also wanted to point out the drastic dip that we had when we had the large spike in COVID cases in November. And then you can see how that's rebounded. So, and then dipped over the holidays again. But we're on a pretty steady increase. I also noted in my report that the cardio is usually the busiest and hasn't been because of the masks. And over the past week since I submitted that report, usage has started to increase in the cardio. So we are seeing the trends that we usually see this time of year, which is encouraging. I also wanted to point out the Sundays. that we have, we're going to give it a shot. We have always closed on Sundays because in the past usage just did not support Sunday opening. But this is different. And a community member came to us and made a very good case that so many places are closed, including Gilpin Rec Center, and restrictions in so many other places. So we're going to give it a go. And as long as we continue to have people come, we will go with it. We are promoting it as a family day since the kids are out of school, and that's a time that parents and kids can usually hang out together and do activities. That doesn't mean there's any special rate. We're not, excluding anyone. We're just trying to encourage family groups to come and participate at the community center as they can. And that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Dawn. Anyone have questions for our community center? All right. Well, again, thank you to the department heads who spoke and to all the staff that works for you guys. Incredible job lately, keeping things together. And Dawn reopening the community center on Sundays. Great work. And look forward to hearing what new stuff you guys are all doing in the next month. We will move on now to trustee reports, and I apologize for mine not being in a written one this week or this month. It's been kind of a quiet time and got a little quieter because the one thing I thought I was really going to be able to report on last week was supposed to be a meeting last week that didn't happen. It was supposed to be my monthly meeting with Congressman Neguse, and it was going to be discussing the effects of the potential for a CARES 2 Act funding. This is the one that we talked about back in the summer that was going to bring several $100,000 in CARES funding to the town of Nederland, specifically to small communities and counties. But that meeting was canceled because he got tapped to serve as one of the impeachment lawyers or guys in the Senate. So he has not made it back home, and we had to cancel our own meetings. So that was the big thing I wanted to talk about, and it didn't happen. Hopefully that'll happen in the next month. I'll be able to give you some updates on CARES 2 by next month. We'll also be able to tell you about the Metro Mayor's Caucus is having its annual virtual this year retreat on Thursday. So that'll be a chance to sit down with all the mayors again in the metro area and talk about issues and kind of plot out our coming year, specifically what we're looking at the State House and potential legislation we're looking at trying to weigh in on this year. So next month's report will have a little bit more meat to it because meetings won't be as canceled. So moving on from that, Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
My report's in the packet, but largely some things to kind of key on is the electrical shed down at the Barker Meadows Performance Space, Scotia, whatever you want to call it, whatever it officially is, has been completed. As far as I know, it would be ready to be turned on, and whatever power needs would be necessary for any event down there. Plans continue to be finalized for the Big Springs parking. Potentially, I believe Chris has seen some of those plans, and they're still kicking around with JVA getting finalized pieces of that. Wayfinding on the DDA is continuing to move forward and get more and more specific, as Chris had mentioned when we were talking during the work session about the TIP project. That is kind of coinciding with a few of the other projects happening around town. Work is working with both ProSab and SAB to kind of identify the best areas as well as best ways of getting kind of information out for folks and directing folks toward the places in town that are, I guess, businesses and sightseeing areas and all that fun jazz. Notable thing happening with the DDA is we're undergoing kind of working toward an investment policy. We're really dialing in the exact things the DDA board could invest its money in beyond kind of the basis of infrastructure beautification in the downtown area, looking at only, what we are allowed to within state legislation, as well as what are comfortable and logical investments that would guarantee a little bit of a return, not trying to make money necessarily as much as just make sure that there's not money sitting in bank accounts completely unused, that at least at all points we're finding a means to use that money to better the town, or at least give a little bit greater return so that we could have additional funds for matching grants and other infrastructure needs. The public art survey was presented at the last DDA meeting, has some great feedback, and I believe that Mandy's continuing to move that forward at the behest of the DDA. So if you all want to check that out, I believe it's on the DDA website. If not, it's on the DDA's last agenda, which is currently posted on the town's website. DDA is also in continuing discussion and feedback with Chris Peltier about the transportation improvement projects. The request for grant funding, match funds for the right turn lane off of Lakeview was unanimously agreed. And unfortunately, DDA has been so busy lately that the funds for that were allocated out of, I believe, the 2023 DDA budget, which would be around the time that those funds would actually be needed for that project, should we get the grant that I believe Chris is applying for currently. And then last but not least, we wanted to just heads up that the DDA had appointed Ron Mitchell to act as the liaison for the Envision 2030 committee. So a lot of pots kind of going, a lot of things in the pipeline right now with the DDA. The one thing we have checked off the list is the electrical shed. However, that line item has kind of now become performance space ... with a big question mark, just to kind of keep on the keep on the agenda, not let that fall off. I know that there was a question earlier about if the current GOCO grant from ProSab had anything about the performance space. While that didn't, it is still on the DDA's radar and still looking at potential opportunities and ways to partner with festivals and other groups that would like to see that area built out to be a more usable and suitable area for performances and festivals. So that's about it going on right now. If you have any questions, be happy to try to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. Not, we will go to Trustee Apt.
Okay. As I said in my report, the Sustainability Advisory Board is primarily focused on solar energy right now. You know, we've been monitoring the availability of solar energy for low-income people, and the county and Excel are moving ahead with that. And it looks like we're going to get about 13 people covered. That has not changed. I did ask if we, Dave Hatamonji said that he's proposing that some towns put some money in. And so my question was, if we did put some money in, could we get more people covered? And his response was, not really, but we could subsidize the 13 people with town funds to try to get their utility bills even lower. You know, we do have a 23% rate of poverty in Nederland, and a lot of people in Nederland are paying 30% of their income to utilities. So it's something we should look at in other ways. And we're going to get publicity out about energy assistance programs that are available so people can get funding, help with their utilities. And the more people that qualify, the more people that can potentially get low-income solar. The ironic thing is that solar energy is cheaper than the current blend we get from Excel. So if we could go to solar, we'd all see a 20 or 40% savings on our monthly bills, but we're going to get there eventually. It's just going to take some time. The good news is Excel is retiring a bunch of coal plants early. Instead of 2030, they're going to retire them in 2028. So it gets a little closer to renewable energy than we were before. The other program that Garrett McDaniel and a subcommittee of SAB is working on is a Solarize program. And this is a program where we will work with solar energy providers and try to get discounts on solar panels and then make those discounts available to people in the community who are more middle income and want to try to buy solar panels. The price of solar panels, the good news is the price has come down dramatically by at least 60% in the last 10 years. So they aren't as expensive as they used to be, but there isn't really any subsidy right now for anyone like Excel. Something I didn't put in my report is Colorado Communities for Climate Action. The main emphasis there has been working on air pollution issues, greenhouse gas emissions, trying to get reductions from the oil and gas industry, as well as transportation and other areas. So we're making progress, or they are making progress, and we're a member. So we're making some progress on statewide air pollution goals. That's pretty much it. Unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions? Not. Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yeah, I'll just note that this update on ProSab is from last month's meeting. We are yet to meet this month, so just due to scheduling and the way the calendar works out, we're going to be kind of a month out of date for the next couple of updates here. So what has happened since what we discussed last month is that the Trails Master Plan revision process really kicking into gear, and we've drafted the first version of the first part of the public outreach for that Trails Master Plan revision, which is an online survey with a plan to then take the results of that survey, build out a website for the Trails Master Plan revision on the town website, and then start having public forums. And that's going to be coming down the pipeline soon. And I think that, the GOCO grant and the TIP project are two kind of interesting starting points, good ways to get started on talking about trail connectivity through town, and how we see our trails network functioning for the community and for people who come here to recreate in the future. So that's really what we're focusing on, along with what I put in the report here.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Eric? Not. We will move on to Trustee Corvallin.
Okay. I don't have a whole lot. I guess we have the EcoPass meeting next week, so we'll see what that's gonna give us. As far as my other boards that I do, the committee that cares did meet. Was it yesterday? Day before yesterday? Oh, I guess it was last week. But so that is a group that is trying to empower youth and create a youth organized board, so that kind of like a BOT sort of thing, so they can tackle concerns of theirs. And so I believe that I'm going to be the liaison for them with us when that group gets formed. So that was kind of organized on that last meeting. And Foresight is kind of on hold until February, and I believe there's going to be a lot of focus on fire recovery for a lot of 21. So I don't think a whole lot of projects will be happening that weren't already planned, but I guess what we'll be looking at is how previous treatments affected the fires, and we'll hopefully learn something for the future from these fires, I hope. That's it.
All right.
One last thing. If anybody knows anybody, I know the farmers market board that I'm on as needing a new board member. So just putting it out there if you know anyone.
All right. Thank you, Tanya. Any questions? No. We'll move on to Trustee Danforth.
I actually don't have anything to report, as I had a family emergency and was unable to attend the last BZA meeting.
All right. Trustee Taylor.
Well, after the quasi-judicial stuff, I actually attended, believe it or not, a planning commission meeting. They were discussing exactly what we discussed in our working session. It was Chris Peltier's presentation, exactly the one he gave us. Only I think he gave us a better presentation, just to compare them. Then we discussed the marijuana zoning commission, zoning committee. We're going to put together a subcommittee off of the planning commission to discuss current zoning practice around marijuana manufacturing facilities. The assistant town administrator volunteered me as to chair that commission. That's all right, Miranda. I forgive you for that. So we're going to be meeting on Friday and talking about zoning and how it relates to manufacturing of marijuana in town. And finally, they're still working on changes to the ordinance, the subdivision ordinance, and they're cleaning that up and making a lot of corrections and making things less vague, which is always very nice. And I looked it over and it looks pretty good. And it's going to be coming before us eventually. But that's what they're working on in the Planning Commission now. And that's all I got. Are there any questions?
Guess not. Thank you, Julian. We have reached the end of the agenda, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone have any other business they'd like to bring up before we call for adjournment? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
You have a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and multiple seconds. Miranda.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you guys all so much. Have a wonderful night and talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.